Some stories entertain you, others stay with you. If you believe stories have the power to change how we see the world, subscribe and join this community. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear it.
Traded, married, 20 years old. Elena Whitmore's father just sold her to erase his debts. The buyer? Adrian Moretti, a 40-year-old crime lord who doesn't believe in love, only leverage. Their engagement party glitters with champagne and lies. But when Adrian defends her in front of San Francisco's elite, something dangerous ignites between captor and captive. He offers her contracts instead of chains, power instead of imprisonment. Now Elena must decide: survive this arrangement or rule it. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far Elena's journey reaches across the world. The champagne tasted like surrender. Elena Whitmore held the crystal flute between trembling fingers, watching golden bubbles rise and vanish, each one a second closer to the moment she would become someone else's possession. Around her, San Francisco's elite glittered in designer gowns and tailored suits, their laughter sharp as broken glass against the string quartet's elegant melody. White roses cascaded from marble columns. Candlelight flickered across faces she'd known her entire life, faces that now looked through her rather than at her. They all knew what this was: a transaction disguised as a celebration. 20 years old, and Elena had just learned the exact monetary value of her existence: $4.7 million. That's what her father owed. That's what Adrian Moretti had paid to make those debts, and the dangerous men attached to them, disappear. 3 days ago, she'd met her future husband for exactly 12 minutes. She remembered every second. The meeting had taken place in her father's study, that wood-paneled room that smelled of old cigars and older money, money that no longer existed except in the antique furniture and fading portraits. Her father, Richard Whitmore, had sat behind his mahogany desk with the desperate smile of a man drowning in quicksand. Across from him sat Adrian Moretti, 40 years old, dark hair threaded with distinguished silver at the temples, eyes the color of smoke and secrets. He'd worn a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire college tuition, and he'd studied her with the clinical assessment of someone appraising a particularly interesting acquisition. Not with lust. That would have been easier to understand, easier to hate. No, his gaze had been calculational, measuring her potential value in an equation she couldn't begin to comprehend. "Elena," her father had said, his voice too bright, too desperate. "This is Adrian Moretti. He's offered to help us with our financial difficulties." Help. As if this were charity, as if her father hadn't spent the previous night on his knees in her bedroom doorway, tears streaming down his face, explaining that men were coming, bad men, men who broke fingers and burned businesses and didn't care that the Whitmore name had once meant something in this city. "The arrangement is simple," Adrian had said, his voice low and controlled, each word precisely chosen. "A marriage. Legitimate in every legal sense. Your father's debts disappear. You receive financial security. I receive—" He'd paused, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "A wife appropriate to my position." "And if I refuse?" Elena had asked, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Her father had made a strangled sound. Adrian had simply tilted his head slightly, studying her with new interest. "Then I leave this room, your father's creditors arrive tomorrow morning, and the Whitmore estate, including the trust fund your mother established before her death, gets liquidated to pay debts that will still not be satisfied. Your father goes to prison. You finish college with a destroyed name and no resources." He'd leaned forward slightly. "Or you accept my proposal and everyone's problems vanish." "Well, everyone except mine," she'd said. "That depends entirely on your perspective." His eyes had held hers. "I'm not looking for a love story, Miss Whitmore. I'm looking for a partner in a very specific arrangement. You would have freedom within certain boundaries, protection, resources, and eventually, when the arrangement has served its purpose, an exit with your dignity and finances intact." It was the most honest cruelty she'd ever heard. She'd agreed. What choice did she have? Now, 72 hours later, she stood in the garden of the Whitmore estate, soon to be sold, though the guests didn't know that yet, wearing a white cocktail dress that cost more than her father's last mortgage payment. The engagement ring on her finger was a flawless emerald-cut diamond that caught the evening light like captured ice. Beautiful, cold, expensive. Everything Adrian Moretti touched seemed to carry those qualities. "You look absolutely radiant, dear," Mrs. Patterson gushed, appearing at Elena's elbow with the practiced smile of San Francisco society. Her eyes, however, told a different story. They cataloged every detail with the sharp assessment of a woman who made careers out of other people's secrets. "Such a whirlwind romance. We had no idea you and Mr. Moretti were even acquainted." "Because we weren't," Elena thought. "Because 3 days ago I didn't know he existed, and now I'm wearing his ring." "Adrian values privacy," Elena said instead, the lie smooth on her tongue. She was learning quickly. Had to. Of course, Mrs. Patterson leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming. "Though one does wonder. Such an age difference. My dear, you're barely out of college, and he's exactly where he needs to be." The voice came from behind Elena, low and commanding, and she felt the atmosphere shift before she even turned around. The conversations nearby stuttered and died. Mrs. Patterson's face went carefully neutral, the social predator suddenly aware of an apex predator in her territory. Adrian Moretti had arrived. He moved through the crowd like a knife through silk, smoothly, inevitably, leaving a wake of whispers and diverted gazes. He wore black tonight, a suit that made him look like elegant violence contained in expensive fabric. Two men flanked him at a respectful distance, their eyes constantly scanning the crowd with professional wariness. Security, or perhaps something less legal and more lethal. He stopped directly beside Elena, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and cedar sharp. His hand settled on the small of her back, possessive but not aggressive. "Mrs. Patterson," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Thank you for coming." "Of course, we wouldn't miss—" But Adrian was already turning away, guiding Elena with that firm hand toward the center of the garden where a small raised platform waited. Mrs. Patterson's words died in her mouth. "You're late," Elena murmured, keeping her smile fixed as they walked. "I'm precisely on time," Adrian replied. "I wanted you to experience the vultures alone first, to understand what you're stepping into." "How considerate." "I don't do considerate." His fingers pressed slightly against her back. "I do strategic. There's a difference." They reached the platform, and Adrian's presence alone seemed to command silence. The string quartet faded. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every face turned toward them, some curious, some envious, some calculating the social implications of this union. Richard Whitmore stood to the side, his face flushed from too much champagne and too much relief. He'd been saved. The cost, his daughter, apparently sat easy on his conscience tonight. Adrian didn't reach for a microphone. He didn't need one. His voice carried with natural authority. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our engagement," he said. And Elena noticed he said our, not my. A small distinction, but in a world of power plays and subtle dominance, perhaps it mattered. "I know many of you are surprised by this announcement. Elena and I have kept our relationship private until now." Relationship, another lie, smooth as silk. "But I want to make something clear." His hand moved from her back to her waist, drawing her closer against his side. She could feel the solid warmth of him through the expensive fabric of his suit. "Elena isn't a trophy. She isn't an accessory. She is my partner, my equal, and anyone who fails to show her the respect she deserves will answer directly to me." The threat underneath the polite words was unmistakable. Elena's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected him to establish her position so forcefully, so publicly. In his world, a world she was only beginning to understand, such declarations mattered. They set boundaries, created protection. Why would he do that for a transaction? Before she could process the question, her father climbed onto the platform, champagne sloshing in his glass. "To my daughter," he announced too loudly, his words slightly slurred. "And to Adrian, who's been so generous." Adrian's hand tightened on Elena's waist. She felt the tension in his body, coiled and dangerous. So generous with his time and his resources. Richard beamed, oblivious to the way Adrian's eyes had gone flat and cold. A father couldn't ask for a better solution to— "Mr. Whitmore," Adrian's voice cut through the rambling toast like a blade. "You should sit down." It wasn't a suggestion. Richard's smile faltered. I was just saying, you were just leaving the platform. Adrian's tone didn't rise, didn't sharpen, but somehow became more dangerous in its quietness. Before you say something you'll regret. The threat was clear to everyone now. Elena watched her father's face go pale, watched him register, finally, the kind of man he'd sold his daughter to. Richard set down his champagne glass with shaking hands and descended from the platform without another word. Adrian released Elena and stepped to the edge of the platform alone. When he spoke again, his voice had returned to that controlled, almost pleasant tone. My fiancée is not a solution to anyone's problems. She is not a bargaining chip or a business transaction. She is Elena Whitmore, soon to be Elena Moretti, and in that name she carries my protection and my authority. His gaze swept the crowd, and Elena saw people physically lean back from the weight of it. Is that understood? Murmured agreements rippled through the garden. Adrian turned back to Elena and extended his hand. Dance with me. It wasn't a request, but his eyes held a question. She could refuse. Even now, even here, she could refuse, and he would accept it. She took his hand. The string quartet immediately shifted to a waltz. Someone had been waiting for this cue. Adrian led her down from the platform to a clear space in the garden where imported marble had been laid for dancing. His hand settled on her waist again, hers on his shoulder, their other hands joined. They began to move. You didn't have to do that, Elena said quietly as they turned across the marble. Do what? Defend me. Humiliate my father. Make yourself look possessive in front of all these people. I am possessive. His eyes held hers, smoke and secrets and something she couldn't quite name. You agreed to be mine, Elena. That means you fall under my protection. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects me. I don't tolerate disrespect. I'm a transaction. You said so yourself. I said this was an arrangement. They turned again, perfectly synchronized despite never having danced together before. He led with absolute confidence, and her body followed instinctively. I said I wasn't looking for a love story, but arrangements have terms, and one of my terms is that you are treated with the dignity befitting my wife. Your wife who you bought. Your wife who you saved, he corrected, from prison, poverty, and the very real violence your father attracted. Don't romanticize what you escaped, Elena. The men he owed, they wouldn't have stopped with his fingers. She missed a step. Adrian caught her smoothly, his hand firm on her waist. You're trying to frighten me, she said. I'm trying to make you understand the world you're entering. Fear is appropriate, but so is intelligence. They moved in silence for a moment, and then he added, You asked me one question in your father's study. You asked what would happen if you refused. You answered. I answered what would happen to your father and your finances. I didn't answer what would happen to you specifically. Elena's heart began to beat faster. What would have happened to me? Adrian leaned closer, his mouth near her ear so no one else could hear. The men your father owed money to don't just collect debts, Elena. They collect leverage. A young woman from a good family, educated, attractive. You would have been valuable to them in ways that would make this arrangement look like a fairy tale. Ice flooded her veins. So when you look at this ring, Adrian continued, his voice still low and intimate to anyone watching, when you stand in front of a mirror in a wedding dress in 3 weeks, when you move into my home and my life, remember this, I am the better monster. I'm the one who put a ring on your finger instead of a collar around your neck. He pulled back, his expression neutral, and they continued dancing as if he'd just commented on the weather. Elena's mind reeled. She'd known her father's debts were serious. New men had threatened him, frightened him badly enough that he'd cried in front of her. But she hadn't understood the full scope of the danger, hadn't let herself understand. Why tell me this now? She managed to ask. Because you need to stop looking at me like I'm your jailer. They turned again, his hand steady on her waist. I'm your protection. There's a difference. And the sooner you understand that difference, the easier this arrangement becomes for both of us. The waltz ended. Applause rippled through the crowd. Polite, careful applause from people who were rapidly recalculating their understanding of Adrian Moretti and his unexpected engagement. Adrian raised her hand to his lips, a gesture that looked romantic and possessive all at once. Smile, he murmured. They're watching. Elena smiled, but her mind was racing. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd prepared herself for a cold arrangement, for a man who would treat her as an expensive acquisition and nothing more. But Adrian was something else, something more complex and more dangerous. He'd humiliated her father to establish her position, threatened an entire garden full of San Francisco's elite to protect her reputation, told her brutal truths about the violence she'd escaped. Why? If this was truly just a transaction, why bother? Unless... Come, Adrian said, releasing her hand but keeping his palm against the small of her back as he guided her away from the dance floor. There are people you need to meet. The next hour became a blur of introductions. Adrian moved through the crowd with practiced ease, and Elena followed in his wake like a planet caught in gravitational orbit. He introduced her to business associates, men and women who ran companies she recognized from news headlines, to political figures whose campaign posters she'd seen plastered across the city, to people whose names meant power and whose handshakes felt like signed contracts. And through it all, Adrian's hand remained on her back, her waist, her elbow, a constant possessive presence that announced ownership and protection in equal measure. Senator Michaels, my fiancée, Elena Whitmore. This is David Chen. He runs the largest shipping operation on the West Coast. Elena, this is Margaret Torres. She and I serve on several boards together. Each introduction came with a subtle test. Elena could feel these people assessing her, measuring her worth, trying to determine if she was intelligent or just decorative. Some spoke to her with thinly veiled condescension. Others ignored her entirely, directing their conversation solely to Adrian. But a few, a dangerous, calculating few, looked at her with genuine interest, as if they saw something beyond the young woman being paraded on a powerful man's arm. "So you're the famous Elena," said a woman named Victoria Cross, whose steel gray suit and sharper gray eyes marked her as someone who'd fought for every inch of her position. "Adrian's been quite secretive about you." "Adrian values discretion," Elena replied, using the same deflection she'd used earlier. "Discretion." Victoria's smile was all edges. "Is that what we're calling it?" She glanced at Adrian, who'd been drawn into conversation with a congressman 2 steps away. "Tell me, dear, what does a 20-year-old college student offer a man like Adrian Moretti, besides the obvious, of course?" The insult was delicate but unmistakable. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice level. "I suppose you'd have to ask him, though I imagine a woman of your experience knows that assumptions often reveal more about the person making them than the person they're directed at." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Well, perhaps there's more to you than—" "Victoria." Adrian's hand settled on Elena's waist again, and his tone carried a warning. "I hope you're not making my fiancé uncomfortable. Just getting acquainted." Victoria's smile didn't waver, but something in her eyes shifted, recalibration. "She's got claws. I approve." "I don't need your approval," Adrian said flatly. "No, but she might." Victoria raised her champagne glass in a small salute to Elena. "Welcome to the Sharks, dear. Try not to bleed too obviously." She walked away, leaving Elena's heart pounding. "What was that about?" Elena asked quietly. "A test." Adrian's thumb moved in small circles on her waist. "Unconscious? Or deliberate?" Victoria runs one of the most influential PR firms in the country. She was determining whether you're an asset or a liability to my reputation. "And?" "You held your ground. That's good." He guided her toward the garden's edge, away from the densest part of the crowd. "But you need to understand something about these people, Elena. They will test you, constantly. They'll push boundaries, probe for weaknesses, try to determine exactly how much power you hold, and whether you know how to use it." "I don't hold any power," Elena said. "I'm just my wife." The words stopped her cold. "Or you will be in 3 weeks, and that gives you considerable power whether you realize it or not. My enemies will try to use you against me. My allies will try to use you to gain favor. And everyone in between will be watching to see what kind of woman I've chosen to stand beside me." Chosen. As if she'd been selected for her merit rather than purchased to settle a debt. "I don't know how to be what you need," Elena admitted quietly. For the first time that evening, something that might have been genuine emotion crossed Adrian's face. "Then I'll teach you." They stood at the garden's edge now, partially hidden by an arbor draped in white roses. The party continued behind them, music and laughter, and the clink of champagne glasses. But here, in this small pocket of relative privacy, it felt like they existed in a separate world. Why? Elena turned to face him fully. Why would you bother teaching me anything? If this is just an arrangement, just a transaction, why not just, I don't know, park me in a mansion somewhere and visit occasionally for appearances? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face as if trying to determine how much truth she could handle. Because I need a partner, he said finally. Not a decoration, not a victim, not a pretty thing to show off at parties. His hand came up and his fingers brushed her jawline with unexpected gentleness. I need someone intelligent enough to understand my world, strong enough to survive it, and ruthless enough to help me protect it. You think I'm ruthless? I think you have the capacity for it. You agreed to marry a stranger to save your father from his own stupidity. That takes a certain coldness, Elena, a certain calculation. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. I can work with calculation. I can cultivate it, refine it, turn it into something powerful. Oh, you want to turn me into a weapon? I want to turn you into a queen. His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. My queen, ruling beside me, not behind me. The word should have terrified her, should have sent her running toward the garden gates, toward escape, toward anything but this man and his dangerous promises. Instead, something dark and hungry stirred in her chest. Power. That's what he was offering, wasn't it? Not love, not romance, not the fairy tale ending she'd once dreamed about in college while studying art history, and thinking her biggest problem would be choosing a graduate program. Power, protection, purpose. I don't know if I can be what you need, she said again. Then we'll find out together. Adrian's hand dropped from her face, returning to the more neutral position on her waist. But first you need to understand the rules of this arrangement. Rules? We'll discuss them tomorrow. I'm taking you to dinner, 8 p.m. One of my drivers will pick you up from your father's house. You're not asking. No. A slight smile touched his lips. I'm not. Do you want me to? Elena considered this, considered the honest cruelty of it, the clear boundaries he was establishing. Part of her wanted to fight it, to assert some kind of independence just to prove she could. But another part, a smarter, colder part that was learning quickly, recognized the wisdom in understanding exactly what she'd agreed to before the wedding made it permanent. No, she said finally. I don't want you to ask. I want you to be honest. Then here's honesty. Tomorrow we discuss terms, financial arrangements, living situations, expectations on both sides. You'll have lawyers present if you want them. You'll sign contracts that protect your interests. And you'll learn exactly what being Elena Moretti entails. And tonight you survive this party, smile for the cameras, and let these people see you as mine. His hand tightened slightly on her waist. Can you do that? Could she? Elena looked past him at the glittering crowd, at the champagne and the white roses and the elegant cruelty of San Francisco society. At her father, drunk and relieved, talking too loudly to anyone who would listen. At the faces turned in their direction, watching, calculating, judging. She thought about the men her father had owed, about what Adrian had said would have happened to her, about collars instead of rings. She looked back at Adrian, at this man who'd bought her but called her his partner, who'd humiliated her father to protect her reputation, who promised to teach her how to be a queen in a kingdom built on shadows and secrets. Yes, Elena said, I can do that. Good. Adrian offered his arm, formal and old-fashioned. Then let's finish this circus. They returned to the party together, and Elena played her role perfectly. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at the appropriate jokes, accepted congratulations with grace, and deflected invasive questions with diplomatic vagueness. She danced with Adrian twice more and allowed herself to be photographed standing beside him, his arm around her waist, her hand displaying the enormous diamond that marked her as his. Property, protection, partner? She didn't know yet, but she was learning. As midnight approached and guests began departing with promises to attend the wedding, Elena found herself alone for a moment near the dessert table. She reached for a chocolate truffle, her first actual food of the evening, and felt the weight of the engagement ring pull at her finger. $4.7 million. That's what he'd paid for her. But standing there in her white dress, surrounded by the ruins of her old life and the dangerous promise of her new one, Elena wondered if perhaps the price he'd paid wasn't for her at all. Maybe it was the price of admission to his world, to his empire, to a throne she was only beginning to glimpse. "Miss Whitmore?" She turned to find one of Adrian's security men standing at a respectful distance. "Mr. Moretti asked me to inform you that he's departed. He said to tell you that tomorrow night, dinner, 8 p.m. Don't be late." The man disappeared before Elena could respond. Don't be late. As if she had any choice. As if she'd had any choice since the moment her father had gambled away everything that mattered and left her holding the debt. But as Elena looked around the emptying garden, at the wilting roses and the abandoned champagne glasses, at the evidence of a celebration that had been anything but celebratory, she realized something important. Adrian Moretti had bought her. Yes, but he'd also given her a choice in how she responded to being bought. She could be a victim, beautiful, sad, powerless, or she could be something else, something dangerous, something powerful. Tomorrow night she would sit across from him at dinner and learn the rules of the game she'd been forced to play. And then she would decide whether to simply play the game, or whether to learn how to win it. Elena left the garden wearing Adrian's ring and carrying a question that burned in her chest like cold fire. If he could turn her into a queen, what could she turn herself into? She had 3 weeks until the wedding to find out. 3 weeks to transform from Elena Whitmore, daughter, debt, desperate transaction, into Elena Moretti, whatever that meant. The champagne had tasted like surrender, but perhaps surrender was just another word for strategy. Perhaps the girl who'd been sold could become the woman who ruled. Perhaps. The garden lights dimmed behind her as she walked toward the house, toward her room, toward the last few weeks of the life she'd known. Ahead of her lay territory unmapped and dangerous. Behind her, the ruins of everything she'd lost. And around her finger, a diamond ring that promised either salvation or damnation. She wasn't yet sure which, but she would learn. Elena Whitmore was a fast learner. She had to be. Her survival depended on it. The black Mercedes arrived at precisely 8 p.m. Elena watched from her bedroom window as it pulled into the circular driveway, its polished surface reflecting the mansion's exterior lights. Not Adrian's car. He wouldn't drive himself, she realized. Men like him had people for that. People for everything. She'd spent the entire day preparing for this dinner, though not in the way she might have prepared for a date in her old life. No agonizing over dresses or makeup tutorials. Instead, she'd spent hours researching Adrian Moretti. What she'd found had been both illuminating and terrifying. On the surface, he was legitimate. CEO of Moretti Holdings, a vast corporate empire spanning shipping, real estate, technology investments, and private security. He sat on charity boards, donated to political campaigns, appeared in business journals discussing market trends and corporate responsibility. But beneath that carefully constructed veneer, rumors swirled like sharks in dark water. Connections to organized crime families, though never proven. Business competitors who disappeared or suddenly sold their companies at massive losses. A pattern of expansion that looked less like business strategy and more like territorial conquest. And yet, nothing stuck. No charges, no investigations that went anywhere, no evidence that could hold up in court. Adrian Moretti existed in the gray space between legal and lethal, and he'd perfected the art of remaining untouchable. This was the man she was going to marry. Elena descended the stairs in a simple black dress, elegant without being provocative, expensive without being ostentatious. She'd learned something important last night. In Adrian's world, everything was a message. Her clothing, her posture, her words, all of it communicated information to people watching for weakness. She wouldn't give them any. The driver waited by the car, a man in his 30s with the alert stillness of someone trained for violence. He opened the rear door without speaking. Elena slid into the leather interior, and the door closed with a solid, expensive sound. The driver returned to his seat, and they pulled away from the Whitmore estate without a word exchanged. Inside the car, Elena found a slim leather folder on the seat beside her. She opened it to discover contracts, actual legal documents, dense with clauses and subclauses. A note in bold handwriting was clipped to the front page. Read these before we arrive. You'll want to understand what you're signing. A. Elena's heart began to race as she scanned the documents. The first was a prenuptial agreement, but not the kind designed to protect wealth from a potential divorce. This one established a separate trust in her name, funded with $2 million upon marriage, with annual additions of $500,000 as long as the marriage continued. The second document created a legal entity, a shell corporation in her name that would hold property rights to a penthouse in downtown San Francisco, a beach house in Monterey, and investment portfolios worth another $3 million. The third was the most surprising, an exit clause. After 5 years of marriage, she could choose to leave with everything in her trust and corporate holdings intact, plus an additional settlement of $10 million. No contest, no legal battle, no fighting over assets. He was giving her a golden parachute. Why? The car wound through the city streets, climbing toward Pacific Heights, and Elena read through every clause, every provision, every carefully worded guarantee. These weren't the contracts of a man looking to trap someone. These were the contracts of someone establishing a genuine partnership, protecting both parties, creating security, ensuring neither could completely destroy the other. But they were also the contracts of someone who understood power, because while she would have financial security, Adrian maintained complete control over his business empire, his properties, his operations. She would be wealthy, protected, independent in many ways, but she would never touch the core of what made him powerful. The car pulled up to a building Elena recognized, the Tesoro, one of the most exclusive restaurants in San Francisco. The kind of place where reservations required months of advance notice and where senators dined with tech billionaires while making deals that would reshape industries. Adrian waited on the sidewalk, checking his watch with the casual confidence of a man who knew the world would wait for him. He wore a dark navy suit tonight, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. Less formal than last night, but somehow more dangerous, like seeing a predator out of its cage. The driver opened Elena's door, and she stepped out with the folder of contracts in hand. Adrian's eyes went to the folder, then to her face. Questions? Several hundred, Elena said. A slight smile touched his lips. Good. That means you actually read them. He offered his arm. Shall we? The restaurant's interior was all dark wood and soft lighting, the kind of elegant simplicity that cost a fortune to achieve. A maitre d' appeared instantly, greeting Adrian by name and leading them to a private room in the back, separated from the main dining area by frosted glass panels that suggested privacy without complete isolation. Their table was set for two, candles already lit, wine already breathing in a crystal decanter. No menus appeared. You ordered already? Elena asked as they sat. I ordered yesterday when I made the reservation. Adrian poured wine into both their glasses with practiced ease. The chef knows my preferences. If there's something you don't eat, tell me now and I'll have them adjust. You didn't ask what I like. No, I didn't. He set down the decanter and met her eyes across the candlelight. I'm determining whether you'll speak up when you want something changed, or whether you'll suffer silently to avoid conflict. It's a test, Elena. Everything is a test. She should have been angry, should have bristled at being constantly evaluated, constantly measured. Instead, she found herself oddly intrigued by the brutal honesty of it. I don't like oysters, she said. Everything else is fine. Noted. Adrian raised his wine glass slightly. To honest assessments. Elena raised her own glass and drank. The wine was excellent, complex and rich in ways she didn't have the vocabulary to describe. The contracts, she said, setting down her glass and opening the folder between them. The exit clause. After 5 years, I can leave with everything intact. Yes. Why 5 years? Because that's how long I estimate this arrangement needs to serve its purpose. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her across the candlelight. 5 years to establish my position, consolidate certain operations, create the appearance of stability that certain business partnerships require. You need a wife for appearances. I need a wife for legitimacy, he corrected. There are doors that only open to married men with families, boards that won't seat bachelors, political connections that require the veneer of traditional values. I've put off marriage for years because I refuse to bring someone into my life who would be a liability. And you think I won't be? I think you have the intelligence to become an asset instead. The first course arrived, some kind of delicate fish preparation that looked like edible art. Adrian waited until the server departed before continuing. But that depends entirely on whether you're willing to learn or whether you're going to spend 5 years resenting your circumstances. Elena took a bite of the fish, buying herself time to think. It dissolved on her tongue, butter and herbs, and something citrus she couldn't quite identify. If I'm going to learn, she said carefully, I need to understand what I'm learning to do. You said you need a partner. What does that actually mean? It means you attend events with me, present a united front, conduct yourself in ways that enhance rather than damage my reputation. It means you learn to read people, identify threats, understand the subtle power dynamics at play in every interaction. He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. It means you become someone these people respect rather than dismiss. Like Victoria Cross. Adrian's expression shifted slightly. Approval, perhaps. You remember her. She tested me, called me out for being young, and implied I was only decoration. Elena set down her fork. You said she runs a PR firm. She has power of her own, considerable power. Victoria can destroy reputations with a well-placed story or elevate unknowns to positions of influence with the right media strategy. She's ruthless, brilliant, and completely amoral about using both qualities. And you want me to be like her? I want you to be able to hold your own against her. Adrian finished his fish and set aside his plate. There are 3 types of people in my world, Elena. Predators, prey, and parasites. The predators make the rules, the prey follow them, and the parasites attach themselves to whoever seems strongest. You need to decide which one you're going to be. The words should have been offensive, should have made her want to throw her wine in his face and walk out of this private room, out of this arrangement, out of this dangerous world he was dragging her into. But instead, she heard the challenge underneath. He was asking which one she wanted to be. What happens if I choose wrong? Elena asked quietly. Then you become a liability instead of an asset, and we both spend 5 years tolerating an arrangement that benefits neither of us. Adrian's voice was matter of fact, without judgment. You'll still leave wealthy and protected, but you'll leave having wasted an opportunity. What opportunity? To become powerful in your own right. The second course arrived, something with duck and cherries and a sauce that smelled like reduced wine and darkness. Elena waited until they were alone again before speaking. I read about you today, she said. Your businesses, your board positions, your charitable foundations, all very impressive and very legitimate. But, Adrian prompted, but there are rumors underneath all of that. Stories about competitors who crossed you and regretted it. Business deals that look less like negotiations and more like hostile takeovers. A pattern of expansion that suggests you're building an empire, not just running companies. And what do you think about those rumors? Elena considered her answer carefully. This was another test, she knew. He was measuring how much truth she could handle, how much reality she was willing to see. I think they're probably true, she said finally. I think you operate in spaces where the law is flexible and power is the only currency that matters. I think you're exactly as dangerous as people say you are, maybe more so because you're better at hiding it than most. Adrian smiled. It was a real smile this time, not the controlled social expression he'd worn at the engagement party. Good. Don't ever lie to yourself about what I am, Elena. That's how people get hurt in my world. They convince themselves of comfortable fictions, and then reality comes for them with teeth. So, what are you? She held his gaze. Really? I'm a businessman who understands that traditional rules are written by people trying to maintain power they didn't earn. I operate in gray spaces because that's where actual opportunity exists. I make deals that benefit me, protect people who are loyal, and eliminate threats before they become existential. He took a sip of wine. I'm not a good man, but I'm an honest one, at least with people I've chosen to trust. And you trust me. I'm deciding whether I can. Adrian set down his wine glass. That's what tonight is about. Not romance, not seduction, assessment. I need to know if you're going to be an active participant in this arrangement or a passive victim. Because passive victims are liabilities, and I don't keep liabilities around for long. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Elena felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice steady. What would happen to a liability? In most cases, divorce, generous settlement, non-disclosure agreements that keep everyone protected. Adrian's eyes never left hers. But we're not in most cases, are we? You know too much about your father's debts, about the men he owed, about how I made those problems disappear. That makes you a different kind of liability. Are you threatening me? I'm being honest with you. He leaned forward slightly. If you try to leave before the 5 years, if you violate the terms of our arrangement, if you become a threat to my operations or my security, yes, there would be consequences. Nothing that would hurt you physically. I'm not that kind of man. But you would find yourself without the protections my name provides. And there are people who would be very interested in a young woman who knows intimate details about Adrian Moretti's business dealings. Fear spiked through her chest, cold and sharp. But underneath the fear, something else stirred, clarity. This was the truth. The real terms of their arrangement, stripped of polite fiction and social pretense. She wasn't just marrying into wealth and protection. She was entering a world where knowledge was currency and loyalty was survival, and the wrong choice could destroy her. So I have 5 years to prove I'm an asset, Elena said slowly, or I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Essentially, yes. Adrian didn't apologize for the brutality of it. Though if you prove yourself valuable, the protections extend far beyond 5 years. Partners who demonstrate loyalty and capability find themselves with resources and security most people can't imagine. The duck was growing cold on her plate. Elena cut into it mechanically, her mind racing through implications and options. You want me to be a predator, she said. I want you to be whatever serves you best. But yes, in my world, predators survive and prey gets consumed. I'd prefer my wife to be the former. How do I become that? By learning, by watching, by doing. Adrian resumed eating with the calm of someone who'd just discussed weather rather than veiled threats and power dynamics. Starting tomorrow, you'll begin your education. I'm assigning you a lawyer, my lawyer, actually. Her name is Rebecca Chen, and she'll walk you through the financial arrangements, the contracts, the legal structures that protect both of us. She'll also begin teaching you how to read contracts, identify loopholes, understand what's actually being agreed to versus what people claim is being agreed to. Why would she help me? She works for you. Because I'm paying her to help you. Because having a wife who understands contract law makes her more valuable to me. And because Rebecca enjoys teaching people who are smart enough to learn. He paused. You'll also meet with my head of security tomorrow afternoon, Michael Ross. He'll brief you on protocols, threats, and basic security awareness. You think I'm in danger? I think everyone in my life is potentially in danger, and I don't leave my people unprepared. Adrian's voice carried absolute certainty. After the wedding, you'll move into my home. It's secure, monitored, and staffed with people trained to handle threats. You'll learn those systems, meet those people, understand how to use the resources available to you. Elena processed this cascade of information. Tomorrow she'd meet lawyers and security personnel. After the wedding, she'd live in a fortress. She was entering a world where danger was assumed and security was a full-time occupation. What about my life? She asked. My friends, my interests, your degree in art history? Adrian finished. You can keep it. Finish your coursework remotely if you want, though I suspect you'll find it less relevant once you understand what you're actually capable of. He studied her across the candlelight. Your friends will mostly fall away on their own. They won't understand your new life, and you'll find you have less and less in common with them. It's not cruel, it's just reality. You're moving into a different stratosphere. That sounds lonely. It can be, or it can be liberating, depending on your perspective. Adrian's expression softened slightly. I'm not asking you to give up everything that matters to you, Elena. I'm asking you to recognize that what mattered to you 3 days ago was based on a life that no longer exists. Your father's debts destroyed your old life. I'm offering you a new one. Better or worse is entirely up to you. The third course arrived, something with lamb and root vegetables and a reduction sauce that looked almost black. Elena stared at her plate, her appetite gone, despite the exquisite preparation. I feel like I'm disappearing, she said quietly. You are. Adrian's honesty was brutal. Elena Whitmore is disappearing. The question is who Elena Moretti becomes in her place. Someone powerful, someone capable, someone who looks back on this moment and realizes it was the beginning of something extraordinary. He paused. Or someone who spends 5 years treading water, waiting for an exit clause that feels more like failure than freedom? You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You decide who you want to be, and then you do the work to become that person. Elena finally looked up from her plate, meeting his eyes across the candlelight. And what if I decide I want to be someone you can't control? For the first time that evening, Adrian laughed, a genuine sound of surprised pleasure. Then you'll have proven yourself more valuable than I imagined. I don't want someone I can control, Elena. I want someone who can stand beside me and hold her own. Control is for prey and parasites. Partners are something else entirely. What are they? Equals in ambition, if not always in power. Allies who understand that shared success benefits both parties. People who challenge each other to be better, sharper, more dangerous. He set down his fork and folded his hands on the table. I've been alone at the top of my empire for a long time. It's effective, but limiting. A true partner, someone intelligent enough to see opportunities I miss, ruthless enough to exploit them, and loyal enough not to betray me, that could be transformative. You think I could be that? I think you have the raw material. Whether you develop it depends entirely on your choices over the next few months. They ate in silence for a while, the weight of these conversations settling between them like sediment in wine. Elena's mind churned through everything he'd said, everything he'd implied, every test and challenge and brutal honesty. She was terrified, but she was also strangely energized. Because Adrian was right about one thing. Her old life had already been destroyed. The girl who'd studied art history and worried about graduate programs and thought her biggest problem was choosing between museums for internships. That girl was gone, crushed under the weight of her father's failures and dangerous debts. She could mourn that loss, or she could become something else. Tell me about the threats, Elena said suddenly. Adrian's eyebrows rose slightly. The threats? You said everyone in your life is potentially in danger. You're assigning me security training. You live in a fortress. She set down her fork and leaned forward. If I'm going to be your wife, if I'm going to live in your world, I need to understand what I'm facing. What are the actual threats? Adrian studied her for a long moment, and Elena saw the calculation in his eyes, measuring whether she was ready for this, whether she could handle it. Business competitors who would love to use you as leverage against me, he said finally. Rival organizations who see my expansion as territorial encroachment. Former associates who believe I betrayed them when I chose legitimacy over loyalty. Law enforcement agencies that would be very interested in finding someone close to me, willing to cooperate with investigations. He paused. And occasionally, people who are simply unstable, obsessed with power or wealth, or the idea of bringing down someone they perceive as untouchable. Have any of these people hurt people close to you before? Yes. The single word fell between them like a stone in water. Who? Elena asked. My previous attorney. Someone planted a car bomb 5 years ago. He survived but lost the use of his legs. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. A business partner's daughter was kidnapped 3 years ago. We got her back, but not before she'd been held for 6 days in conditions I won't describe. My head of security's wife divorced him because she couldn't handle the constant threat assessment, the security protocols, the reality of what his job actually required. Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. And you're bringing me into this? I'm being honest with you about what this entails. The threats are real, Elena, but so are the protections. The car bombing led to a complete overhaul of our security systems. The kidnapping led to protocols that make such events nearly impossible now. We learn from every attack, every threat, every close call. He leaned back in his chair. You'll be safer as my wife than you would be walking away from this arrangement. Because of the men my father owed. Among other reasons. Adrian's eyes held hers. I meant what I said at the engagement party. You fall under my protection now. Anyone who touches you answers to me, and I'm considerably more dangerous than the loan sharks your father borrowed from. It should have been terrifying. It was terrifying, but it was also, in a strange way, reassuring, because Adrian's brutal honesty meant she knew exactly where she stood. No comfortable fictions, no pretty lies, no false promises of safety that would evaporate the moment reality came calling. Just truth, hard and sharp and real. I want to learn, Elena said quietly. Everything you're offering to teach me, strategy, security, how to read people and identify threats, and become someone these people respect instead of dismiss. I want all of it. Why? Because you're right. My old life is gone, and I can either spend the next 5 years being a passive victim of circumstances, or I can become someone powerful enough that circumstances bend to me instead. She held his gaze. I choose the latter. Adrian smiled, a real smile, full of genuine approval. Then we have an understanding. What happens now? Now we finish dinner. Tomorrow you meet with Rebecca and Michael. The day after, we'll review security at my residence, and you'll see where you'll be living after the wedding. The following week, you'll accompany me to a business dinner. Nothing dangerous, just associates and their spouses. You'll watch, listen, learn. And the wedding itself? 2 weeks from Saturday. I've hired a planner to handle the details. You'll meet with her to discuss preferences, flowers, music, whatever matters to you about the ceremony. Adrian's tone suggested these details mattered very little to him. It'll be a significant social event. Politicians, business leaders, people whose presence reinforces my position. You'll need to perform. Perform what? The role of devoted fiancé transitioning to devoted wife. Happiness, affection, commitment, all the social signals people expect from a wedding. He paused. Can you do that? Elena thought about it. Could she stand in front of hundreds of people and pretend to be in love? Could she smile and accept congratulations and act as if this were a fairy tale romance rather than a calculated arrangement? Yes, she said. I can do that. Good, because appearances matter in my world, Elena. We need these people to believe in our marriage, to see it as legitimate and stable. Doubt creates opportunity for enemies to exploit. The final course arrived, something chocolate and elaborate with gold leaf and berry compote. Elena stared at it, her mind full of contracts and threats and the strange reality of her new life. One more question, she said. Ask. Do you want children? Adrian went very still. It was the first time all evening she'd seen him look genuinely caught off guard. Eventually, he said carefully. Not immediately, but yes, eventually children would serve both strategic purposes and other purposes. Other purposes? Legacy, continuation, someone to build all this for. He gestured vaguely, encompassing not just the restaurant but everything beyond it, his empire, his power, his carefully constructed world. But that's years away, Elena. You're 20 years old. You have time to become who you're going to be before we discuss adding that complexity. She should have been relieved, should have been grateful for the delay. Instead, she found herself oddly curious about what kind of father Adrian Moretti would be. Protective, certainly. Demanding, absolutely. But would he be warm? Would he know how to love something that couldn't be controlled or calculated or fit into strategic planning? Thank you for being honest, Elena said. I told you I'm always honest with people I've chosen to trust. Adrian pushed aside his untouched dessert. Now, I have a question for you. What? Are you going to eat that chocolate torte, or should I have them box it for you? The sudden shift to mundane practicality made Elena laugh, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. The tension that had built throughout dinner broke slightly, and she realized Adrian had done it deliberately, giving her a moment to breathe, recognizing that she'd absorbed about as much brutal truth as one person could handle in a single evening. I'll take it home, Elena said, though I doubt I'll eat it. I'm not particularly hungry. Adrenaline, Adrian said. It suppresses appetite. You'll get used to it. Is that what this is? Adrenaline? That's what truth feels like when you're not accustomed to it. He signaled for the server, who appeared instantly. We're finished. Box the desserts for Ms. Whitmore, please. Within minutes, they were walking out of Tesoro into the cool San Francisco night. The Mercedes waited at the curb, but Adrian didn't immediately guide her toward it. Instead, he turned to face her on the sidewalk, his hand settling on her waist in the now familiar gesture of possession and protection. You did well tonight, he said quietly. I didn't do anything. I just listened. You asked intelligent questions. You didn't flinch from uncomfortable truths. You made a clear choice about what you want from this arrangement. His thumb moved in small circles against her waist. Those are significant accomplishments for someone whose world just turned upside down. I'm terrified. Elena admitted. Good. Fear makes you careful. Careful keeps you alive. He studied her face in the streetlight. But don't let fear make you small, Elena. That would be a waste. Before she could respond, he released her waist and opened the Mercedes door himself, dismissing the driver with a slight gesture. 8 a.m. tomorrow, Adrian said as she slid into the back seat. Rebecca will meet you at your father's house. Wear something professional. You're interviewing lawyers, and first impressions matter. I thought she already works for you. She does, but she needs to decide if she wants to work for you too. Rebecca doesn't take clients she doesn't respect. He closed the door but leaned down to the open window. Don't disappoint her. What if I do? Then I'll find you a different lawyer and you'll have lost an opportunity to work with one of the sharpest legal minds on the West Coast. Adrian straightened. But I don't think you will. The driver pulled away from the curb and Elena turned to watch Adrian through the rear window. He stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching the car disappear into San Francisco traffic. A powerful man, a dangerous man. Her future husband. Elena faced forward and found the leather folder of contracts still sitting beside her on the seat. She opened it again, reading through the clauses by the dim interior light of the car. $2 million in trust upon marriage. Properties in her name. An exit clause after 5 years. Legal protections and financial security. And underneath all of it, the unspoken truth. She was entering a world where these contracts were both shield and cage, where power was the only currency that mattered, where becoming prey meant destruction. She thought about Victoria Cross's sharp gray eyes and sharper assessment, about the tests Adrian promised she'd face constantly, about threats and security protocols, and the reality that people in his world got hurt. The girl who'd studied art history would have been overwhelmed, would have cried and panicked and looked for escape. But Elena Whitmore, soon to be Elena Moretti, was discovering something dark and hungry in her chest that responded to these challenges not with fear but with determination. If they wanted to test her, she would pass their tests. If they wanted to measure her worth, she would prove herself invaluable. If they wanted a queen to stand beside their king, she would learn to wear a crown. The Mercedes carried her through the glittering city, toward her father's house, toward the last few days of her old life. Behind her lay dinner and brutal truths and contracts that would bind her fate to Adrian Moretti's. Ahead lay lawyers and security briefings and the wedding that would make it all permanent. And somewhere in the distance, barely visible but growing clearer, lay the woman she might become if she was brave enough to claim that power. Elena touched the engagement ring on her finger, feeling the weight of it. Tomorrow, her education would begin. Tomorrow, she would start learning how to become dangerous. Tomorrow, Elena Whitmore would take the first real steps toward becoming Elena Moretti. And whoever that woman turned out to be, predator, partner, queen, she would be someone worth fearing. The champagne had tasted like surrender. But surrender, Elena was learning, was just the first move in a much longer game. And the game would be won or lost in how well she learned to play it. Rebecca Chen arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, driving herself in a Tesla that whispered money and precision. Elena watched from the front window as the lawyer stepped out, a woman in her mid-40s wearing a charcoal pantsuit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her black hair pulled into a sleek bun that suggested no-nonsense efficiency. Elena met her at the door before her father could stumble downstairs in his bathrobe and embarrass them both. Ms. Whitmore! Rebecca extended a hand, her grip firm and assessing. I'm Rebecca Chen. Adrian asked me to meet with you this morning. Please, come in. Elena led her to the library, the only room in the house that still maintained some dignity. Her father had already sold most of the valuable first editions, but the leather furniture and mahogany shelving still created an atmosphere of old money and education. Rebecca settled into a chair and opened a slim briefcase, extracting a tablet and several more folders of documents. Before we begin, I need to establish something clearly. Adrian is paying me to represent you in this arrangement, but that means I work for you, not him. Everything we discuss is privileged. I won't report back to him unless you explicitly authorize me to do so. Elena blinked. Why would he do that? Because he's smart enough to know that a wife with independent legal counsel is an asset rather than a liability, and because I refuse to take this assignment unless those terms were clear. Rebecca's dark eyes held Elena's. I don't do window dressing, Ms. Whitmore. If I'm going to represent you, I'm going to actually represent you. That means protecting your interests, even when they conflict with Adrian's. Do they conflict? Not yet, but they might. Rebecca pulled up something on her tablet. Did you read the contracts he gave you last night? Yes, all of them. And? Elena chose her words carefully. They seem generous, almost too generous. A $2 million trust, properties in my name, an exit clause with a $10 million settlement. It's more than I expected from what amounts to a business arrangement. It is generous, Rebecca agreed. But it's also strategic. Adrian understands that trapped people become desperate, and desperate people make stupid decisions. By giving you financial independence and a clear exit path, he's ensuring you never feel cornered enough to do something that could damage both of you. Like cooperating with law enforcement. Rebecca's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Among other things, Adrian operates in complex spaces, Ms. Whitmore. Having a wife who feels protected rather than trapped significantly reduces certain risks. So the generosity is self-interest. All generosity is self-interest when you look closely enough. The question isn't whether it serves his purposes. Of course it does. The question is whether it also serves yours. Rebecca set down the tablet and leaned forward slightly. Do you want to go through with this marriage? The question was so direct, so unexpectedly blunt, that Elena felt her breath catch. I don't have much choice, she said finally. You have more than you think. Your father's debts were paid 3 days ago. The threat is gone. You could walk away from this engagement right now, finish college, start over somewhere new. Rebecca's voice was matter-of-fact, without judgment. You'd be starting from scratch financially, and your father would be furious, but you'd be free. Elena stared at her. Adrian said there would be consequences if you violated the terms of your arrangement after agreeing to them, but you haven't signed anything yet. These contracts become binding at the wedding, not before. Right now, today, you could leave. Rebecca pulled out a different document. I took the liberty of drafting an exit agreement, just in case. Adrian would return everything to status quo. Your father's debts paid, no retaliation, no contact. You'd sign a non-disclosure agreement about his business dealings, and that would be the end of it. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she took the document. It was real, actual legal language creating a clean break from Adrian Moretti and everything he represented. Freedom. She could walk away. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked quietly. Because I needed to know if you're staying by choice or by coercion. If it's coercion, I can't ethically help you negotiate terms. I'd be helping trap you further. But if it's choice, even choice made under difficult circumstances, then we can work together to make this arrangement as beneficial as possible for you. Elena looked down at the exit agreement, reading through clauses that would sever her from Adrian's world completely. No marriage, no contracts, no education in power and strategy and becoming someone dangerous, also no protection from whatever enemies her father might have made, no resources to build a life beyond minimum wage work and student debt, no opportunity to become anything other than ordinary. She thought about Adrian's question from last night, predator, prey, or parasite. Walking away would make her prey. Easy target for anyone looking to exploit Richard Whitmore's daughter. Vulnerable and alone and starting from nothing. Staying meant learning to be a predator. I'm staying by choice, Elena said, setting the exit agreement aside. Not because I love him or because I'm excited about this marriage, but because I understand that my old life is gone either way, and this path offers opportunities my old life never did. Rebecca studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right then. Let's make sure you're protected. For the next 3 hours, they went through the contracts clause by clause. Rebecca explained the legal structures, how the trust would be managed, what control Elena would have over the properties in her name, how the exit clause would be triggered, and what documentation would be required. But more than that, she taught. This section here, Rebecca said, pointing to dense legal language about property division, looks standard at first glance. But see this phrase, reasonable access to shared assets? That's deliberately vague. In a divorce, vague language becomes a battlefield. We need to define exactly what reasonable means. What should it say? That depends on what you want. Do you want the right to use Adrian's properties while married? To bring guests to his beach house? To use the corporate jet for personal travel? These things need to be specified now, or you'll be asking permission for everything later. Elena had never thought about corporate jets or beach houses, or what rights she might have to use assets that technically belonged to her husband. It felt surreal, like discussing the logistics of a life that belonged to someone else. But it was her life now. I want reasonable independence, Elena said slowly, the ability to move through his world without having to ask permission for basic things. Rebecca made notes on her tablet. We'll add specific provisions. Use of properties with 48 hours notice. Access to household staff and security personnel. A monthly allowance for personal expenses separate from the trust. She paused. How much do you think you'll need? I don't know. What's normal? For someone in Adrian's position? Anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 a month, depending on lifestyle. Elena nearly choked. $50,000 a month for personal expenses? You'll be expected to maintain a certain appearance. Designer clothes for events, salon appointments, charity contributions, gifts for important people. It adds up quickly. Rebecca's expression was pragmatic. I'd recommend starting at $20,000 and reviewing after 6 months. If it's too much, the excess stays in trust. If it's too little, we renegotiate. $20,000 a month for clothes and haircuts and charity donations. It was more than her father had spent on household expenses in half a year. All right, Elena said, feeling dizzy. $20,000. They continued through the documents, Rebecca making notes and explaining implications and teaching Elena to read between the lines of legal language. By the time they finished, the contracts had been transformed from generous-seeming agreements into actual protections, specific, detailed, enforceable. One more thing, Rebecca said as she gathered her documents. Adrian mentioned you'd be attending events with him. Business dinners, charity galas, political fundraisers. You'll meet people who will try to use you, either to get closer to Adrian or to gather information they can exploit. He said everyone would be testing me. They will. And you need to understand something important. In Adrian's world, everything you say can and will be used. Casual comments at dinner parties become intelligence. Offhand opinions about people or policies get reported back. Even silence communicates information. Rebecca held Elena's gaze. I'm going to teach you how to talk to these people without actually telling them anything. Isn't that just lying? No. Lying is saying something false. What I'm teaching you is the art of saying nothing while appearing to say everything. It's a crucial skill for survival in high-stakes social environments. For the next hour, Rebecca drilled her. How to deflect personal questions without seeming evasive. How to express opinions without committing to positions. How to gather information while revealing nothing. Someone asks you about Adrian's business interests in shipping, Rebecca said. What do you say? I tell them Adrian handles his business affairs and I focus on other things. Too defensive. It suggests you're either ignorant or hiding something. Rebecca shook her head. Better answer, Adrian's so passionate about maritime logistics. I love watching him work, though I'm afraid the technical details are beyond me. Do you work in shipping? Deflect with apparent admiration, suggest you're not a threat, redirect the conversation back to them. That feels manipulative. It is manipulative. That's the point. Rebecca's expression was stern. These people are manipulating you, Elena. Every question, every comment, every seemingly friendly conversation is an attempt to extract information or establish dominance. You can either learn to manipulate back, or you can be the person who gets exploited, predator or prey. Elena practiced the deflections, the redirects, the art of appearing open while revealing nothing. It was exhausting, every word measured, every response calculated, every interaction a small battlefield. You'll get better with practice, Rebecca said as they wrapped up. Eventually it becomes second nature. You'll be able to attend a 3-hour dinner party and walk away having learned everyone else's secrets while protecting all of yours. Is that what you do? Every single day. Rebecca stood and gathered her briefcase. I'll have the revised contracts ready by tomorrow. We'll go through them one more time before you sign. And Elena? She paused at the library door. Adrian chose well. You're smarter than you think you are. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. After Rebecca left, Elena sat alone in the library, her mind spinning with legal language and social manipulation and the strange reality of her new life. She had maybe an hour before Michael Ross, Adrian's head of security, arrived for the afternoon briefing. She spent it reviewing everything Rebecca had taught her, making notes in the margins of her own copies of the contracts, trying to memorize the deflections and redirects. Her father appeared briefly, hungover and anxious, asking if everything had gone well with the lawyer. "Fine," Elena said, not looking up from her notes. "Good, good. That's good." Richard hovered in the doorway. "Elena, I wanted to say, I know this isn't what you wanted, but Adrian's a good man, powerful. He'll take care of you." "He paid $4.7 million for me," Elena said flatly. "Let's not pretend this is anything other than what it is." Father flinched. "I had no choice. The men I owed, I know what they would have done." Adrian explained it in detail. Elena finally looked up at him. "You gambled away everything Mother left us, borrowed from criminals to chase your losses, and when it all came crashing down, you sold me to make it stop. I understand the situation perfectly. Elena, I'm not angry anymore, Dad. I'm just done pretending this is something it isn't." She returned to her notes. "You should probably not drink today. Adrian's security chief is coming at 2, and I'd prefer not to be embarrassed." Richard left without another word, and Elena felt a strange emptiness where anger used to live. She'd spent 3 days hating her father for what he'd done. But now, after understanding the full scope of what Adrian was offering, after seeing the contracts and the exit clauses and the genuine opportunity hidden inside the transaction, her fury had transformed into something colder: calculation. Her father was weak, useful for nothing except making her appreciate strength. Adrian was strong, dangerous, yes. Controlling, absolutely. But strong in ways that created opportunity rather than destroyed it. The choice was obvious. Michael Ross arrived at precisely 2 p.m., driving an unmarked SUV with tinted windows. He was in his early 50s, with the compact build of someone who stayed in serious shape and eyes that never stopped moving, scanning the street, the house, the windows. "Ms. Whitmore?" His handshake was brief and professional. "I'm Michael Ross. I handle security for Mr. Moretti and his interests, which now includes me." "Yes, ma'am." No emotion in the words, just fact. "Mr. Moretti asked me to brief you on protocols and threat assessment. May we speak somewhere private?" Elena led him to the library, where Michael immediately checked the windows, the sight lines, the potential vulnerabilities. He moved like someone for whom security wasn't a job, but a way of seeing the world. "First thing you need to understand," Michael said, settling into the chair Rebecca had occupied earlier, "is that you're a target now. Not because of anything you've done, but because of who you're marrying. People will see you as leverage, a way to hurt Mr. Moretti or extract concessions." Adrian mentioned this. I'm sure he did, but understanding it intellectually and living with it practically are different things. Michael pulled out a tablet and brought up what looked like surveillance footage from various locations. "After the engagement announcement, we detected 3 separate intelligence gathering operations focused on you. One was competitors doing basic background research. One was law enforcement trying to establish whether you might be a cooperative witness. And one was a hostile organization that we're still identifying." Elena felt ice in her stomach. "Someone's watching me?" "Someone's always watching, Ms. Whitmore. That's the reality of Mr. Moretti's world. The question is whether they're watching to gather intelligence or watching to find an opportunity." He swiped through the footage. "This is you leaving the engagement party. See the man in the gray sedan, 3rd car back? He followed your car for 6 blocks before our counter-surveillance team intercepted and identified him." "Who was he?" "FBI agent assigned to the Organized Crime Task Force. They're interested in anyone close to Mr. Moretti." Michael pulled up more footage. "This is from 2 days ago, outside your campus library. Woman with the coffee cup at the bench, private investigator working for a competitor. She photographed everyone you spoke with and ran background checks on them." Elena stared at the images of herself, completely unaware she was being watched and documented. "How did I not notice?" "Because you weren't trained to notice. That changes now." Michael set down the tablet. "I'm going to teach you basic surveillance awareness. How to spot tails, how to vary your routes, how to recognize when someone's paying too much attention. It's not about making you paranoid. It's about making you conscious of your environment." For the next 2 hours, Michael walked her through the fundamentals. How to use reflections in windows to see who was behind her. how to identify the same person or vehicle appearing multiple times in different locations, how to create mental baselines of normal activity and notice deviations. You're not trying to spot every potential threat, he explained. You're trying to notice patterns that don't fit. The same jogger who passes your coffee shop twice in an hour. The delivery truck that's been parked on your street for 3 days. The person who makes eye contact then looks away too quickly. This is exhausting. It becomes automatic with practice. Right now it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose, but in a few weeks, you'll do it without thinking. Michael pulled out a phone. Not a smartphone, but something older and more basic. This is for you. Encrypted communications only. Mr. Moretti's number is programmed in, along with mine and several other security personnel. If you ever feel threatened, if something feels wrong, you call. Immediately. Don't second-guess yourself. Elena took the phone, feeling the weight of it. A direct line to Adrian and his security apparatus. The physical manifestation of protection. Or surveillance. "Can this phone track me?" she asked. Michael didn't insult her by lying. "Yes. GPS tracking is built in. Mr. Moretti can see your location at all times, and so can I. It's for your protection, but I understand if that feels invasive." "It does. I get it. But here's the reality. If something happens to you, we need to be able to respond immediately. Seconds matter in a kidnapping or assault situation. The tracking is the difference between us finding you in 10 minutes versus 10 hours. He paused. "You can turn it off if you want. The phone will still work for calls, but I'd strongly recommend keeping it active." Elena stared at the phone, weighing privacy against protection. In her old life, being tracked would have been unthinkable, a violation of autonomy and freedom. But that life was gone. "I'll keep it on," she said finally. "Good. Now let's talk about the residence." Michael pulled up architectural plans on his tablet, detailed schematics of a cliffside house overlooking the bay. "This is where you'll be living after the wedding. Mr. Moretti had it built 5 years ago with security as the primary design consideration." Elena studied the plans. The house was massive. 3 stories of glass and steel, multiple wings, underground parking, what looked like a separate security station. "How many people work there?" 12 staff members during the day, 4 overnight security personnel, plus another 6 people on the extended property perimeter. Michael zoomed in on different sections. All rooms have panic buttons. The master suite has a reinforced safe room with independent communications and life support. Every entrance is monitored, every window is alarmed, and there are more cameras than I'm comfortable discussing in detail. "It sounds like a prison. It's a fortress. There's a difference." Michael looked up from the tablet. "Ms. Whitmore, I understand this is overwhelming. You're 20 years old. You should be worried about exams and weekend plans, not surveillance detection and panic rooms. But the threat is real, and my job is to keep you alive. I take that job seriously. Has anyone actually tried to hurt Adrian? 3 attempts in the last 7 years. 1 shooting that we intercepted before it reached him. 1 poisoning attempt at a restaurant. We caught it because the waiter deviated from normal serving patterns. 1 planned kidnapping that we disrupted in the planning phase." Michael's voice was matter-of-fact, discussing attempted murder the way someone else might discuss bad weather. "Mr. Moretti has enemies, Miss Whitmore, serious ones, and now you're connected to him, which makes you a potential target." Elena felt the weight of that reality settling over her like a lead blanket. This wasn't abstract danger or theoretical threat. People had actually tried to kill the man she was going to marry, and by extension, they might try to hurt her. "What do I do if someone approaches me?" she asked quietly. "Depends on the context. In public, you have security nearby. You won't see them most of the time, but they're there. If someone makes you uncomfortable, you signal and we extract you. In private spaces, you get to a secure location and call for help. And if you're ever grabbed or physically threatened," Michael's expression hardened, "you fight like hell, and you don't stop fighting until we get to you." "I don't know how to fight." "We'll fix that. I'm arranging self-defense training starting next week. Basic techniques, how to break grabs, how to create distance, how to target vulnerable areas. You're not going to become a martial artist, but you'll learn enough to buy yourself time." They spent another hour going through protocols, where to sit in restaurants for maximum security, how to exit buildings if primary routes were compromised, what to do if she was separated from her security detail. code words that would trigger immediate response. By the time Michael left, Elena's head was pounding with information overload. Surveillance awareness, threat assessment, security protocols, emergency procedures. It felt like learning a new language while simultaneously training for combat. She collapsed on the library sofa, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened in a single day. Rebecca had taught her legal protection and social manipulation. Michael had taught her physical security and threat awareness. Both had emphasized the same fundamental truth. In Adrian's world, ignorance was fatal and preparation was survival. The encrypted phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from an unknown number, though she suspected she knew who it was. How did today go? A. Elena stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Exhausting. Rebecca is sharp. Michael is thorough. I'm learning. The response came within seconds. Good. Tomorrow you see the house. I'll pick you up at 10 a.m. Dress comfortably. We'll be walking the property. No question about whether she was available, just the assumption that her time was his to allocate. Elena should have bristled at the presumption. Instead, she found herself typing, I'll be ready. Because she would be. Ready to see the fortress that would become her home. Ready to continue her education in power and survival. Ready to take another step toward becoming Elena Moretti. That night, Elena dreamed of glass houses and invisible watchers, of contracts written in languages she couldn't quite read and tests she hadn't studied for. She woke before dawn, her heart racing, and spent an hour reviewing everything Rebecca had taught her about legal language and social deflection. At 9:30, she dressed in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, comfortable but expensive, the uniform of someone who belonged in Adrian's world. The engagement ring caught the morning light as she moved, still strange and heavy on her finger. Adrian arrived exactly at 10 in a different car, a Range Rover this time, black and pristine. He drove himself, which surprised her. No driver today? Elena asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. No one else needs to hear what we're going to discuss. He pulled away from her father's house without ceremony. Rebecca called me last night. She said you're a quick study. She's a good teacher. She's the best. That's why I wanted her working with you. Adrian navigated through San Francisco traffic with easy confidence. Michael also reported in. He said you asked intelligent questions and didn't panic when he explained the actual threat level. Should I have panicked? Some people do. They hear about assassination attempts and surveillance, and they shut down. Decide it's too much, too dangerous, too far outside their experience. He glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. You didn't. I'm terrified, Elena admitted, but panic doesn't solve anything. No, it doesn't. Adrian seemed pleased by this assessment. Fear is useful when it makes you careful, useless when it makes you stupid. You're learning the difference. They drove in silence for a while, leaving the city behind and heading north along the coast. The bay stretched out to their left, morning sun turning the water into hammered silver. Tell me about the exit clause, Elena said suddenly. Adrian's expression didn't change. What about it? You could have structured this arrangement without one, locked me in with no escape, but you gave me a way out after 5 years. Why? I told you, trapped people make desperate decisions. That's part of it. But there's something else. Elena turned in her seat to face him. You don't want someone who stays because they have no choice. You want someone who stays because they choose to. And if I do? Then the exit clause isn't generosity. It's a test. 5 years to prove I'm worth keeping, or I leave wealthy but having failed. She watched his profile as he drove. Everything is a test with you. Everything is a test with everyone, Adrian corrected. I'm just honest about it. He took an exit that led toward the cliffs overlooking the Pacific. But you're right. I could have trapped you, legally, financially, emotionally. I'm very good at trapping people when I need to. But you didn't. Because trapped people are liabilities, partners are assets. I'm betting that 5 years is enough time to transform you from the former into the latter. He pulled off the highway onto a private road, tree-lined and winding. If I'm wrong, you leave wealthy and we both move on. If I'm right, what? Then 5 years from now, when you could walk away with everything I've given you, you'll choose to stay anyway. And that choice will mean something. Adrian's voice was quiet but intense. I don't want a wife who stays out of obligation or fear or lack of options. I want a partner who stays because we've built something worth protecting together. The road opened up suddenly, and Elena caught her breath. The house rose from the cliff top like something from an architectural magazine, all clean lines and massive windows, steel and glass and stone integrated so seamlessly it seemed to grow from the landscape itself. 3 stories of elegant brutalism, cantilevered over the cliff edge so the Pacific crashed against rocks 200 feet below. It was stunning. It was intimidating. It was absolutely a fortress pretending to be a home. Adrian pulled into an underground garage that could hold a dozen vehicles. Security cameras tracked their progress. Heavy doors sealed behind them with the solid sound of serious locks engaging. "Welcome to your new home," Adrian said, killing the engine. They rode an elevator up to the main floor, and when the doors opened, Elena stepped into a space that took her breath away. The entire western wall was glass, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the Pacific, natural light flooding the open-plan living area. Furniture in neutrals and dark woods, art on the walls that she recognized as serious pieces worth serious money. Beautiful. Cold. Designed to impress rather than comfort. "The main floor is public spaces," Adrian said, walking her through. "Living room, dining room, kitchen, my office. The second floor has guest suites and a library. Third floor is the master suite. Our bedroom, your office, 2 bathrooms, and the safe room Michael mentioned." "Our bedroom." The words landed with surprising weight. "Do we—" Elena hesitated. "Do we share a bedroom?" "Yes." Adrian's tone was matter-of-fact. Separate bedrooms would signal a marriage of convenience to staff and visitors. We need to present as a legitimate couple, which means sharing private spaces. "But we're not in love, I know. But we are getting married, and that marriage needs to appear genuine." He led her toward a staircase of floating steel and glass. "I'm not asking for intimacy you're not ready to give, Elena, but I am asking for the appearance of a normal marriage, shared bedroom, shared bathrooms, the kind of casual physical proximity that married people have." Elena's pulse quickened. She hadn't thought about this aspect, the actual physical reality of living with Adrian, sharing space, sharing a bed. "I don't know if I can—" "You don't have to decide today." Adrian stopped at the base of the stairs, turning to face her. "We have 2 weeks until the wedding. After that, you'll move in and we'll figure out what works for both of us. But I need you to understand something clearly. I'm not going to force you into anything physical. That's not how I operate." "What if I never want that?" "Then we have a celibate marriage and I find satisfaction elsewhere, discreetly." His eyes held hers. "I want a partner, Elena, not a victim. If intimacy develops naturally because we've built trust and genuine connection, excellent. If it doesn't, we work around it. But I won't take what isn't freely given." The honesty was almost shocking. Most men, Elena thought, would lie about this, promise romance and connection while planning to take what they wanted regardless of consent. But Adrian was different, brutal in his honesty, clear in his boundaries. And somehow that clarity made her feel safer than any romantic promise could have. "Show me the rest of the house," Elena said quietly. They spent the next hour walking through the residence. Adrian explained the security systems, cameras and sensors and redundant communications, showed her the panic rooms and emergency exits, introduced her to 2 security personnel monitoring the systems from a control room hidden behind what looked like an ordinary wall panel. The house was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a palace that was also a bunker, a home that was also a command center. Finally, they reached the 3rd-floor master suite. The space was enormous, larger than Elena's entire bedroom at her father's house. Windows looked out over the ocean, a California king bed dominated one wall, and through an open doorway she could see a bathroom of marble and glass. "Your office is through there," Adrian said, pointing to another door. "I had it set up with everything you might need: desk, computer, secure internet connection. It's your private space. Even I won't enter without permission." Elena opened the door to find a beautiful room with built-in bookshelves, a modern desk facing more windows overlooking the Pacific, and furniture that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. Her own space. In a house of surveillance and security, one room that was entirely hers. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Partners need autonomy," Adrian replied. "This is yours." They stood in the doorway of her future office, looking out at the ocean, and Elena felt the full weight of what she was stepping into. this house, this life, this man who offered protection and danger in equal measure. "What happens on our wedding night?" she asked suddenly. Adrian was quiet for a moment. "We'll attend the reception, perform for our guests, play the role of happy newlyweds. Then we'll come here, to this house, to this bedroom, and we'll figure out what works." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." He turned to face her fully. "I can't predict what you'll want or need that night, Elena. I can promise I won't demand anything you're not ready to give. But beyond that, we'll have to see what happens." It was honest. It was unsettling. It was somehow both reassuring and terrifying. They left the master suite and descended back to the main floor. Adrian showed her the wine cellar, the gym, the outdoor spaces that included a pool, cantilevered over the cliff edge, and gardens maintained by staff she'd never see unless she specifically requested their presence. "One more thing," Adrian said, leading her to his office on the main floor. The space was all dark wood and leather, windows overlooking the ocean, a massive desk that looked like it cost more than a car. He opened a safe hidden behind a painting and extracted a small velvet box. "Your wedding band," he said, opening it to reveal a platinum ring set with channel-cut diamonds, elegant and understated, designed to sit flush against her engagement ring. "I had it custom-made to match." Elena took the box, studying the ring. It was beautiful, expensive, and once she wore it, she would be permanently marked as Adrian Moretti's wife. "The wedding is in 12 days, Adrian continued. "The planner has everything arranged. You'll need to do final fittings for your dress, review the ceremony details, and attend one more dinner with me, political associates who need to see us together before the wedding. More tests. Always more tests." A slight smile touched his lips. "But you're doing well, Elena. Better than I expected, honestly." "What did you expect?" "Someone who would need more time to adjust, more hand-holding through the difficult parts, more emotional support as the reality set in." He studied her with those smoke-dark eyes. "But you're not that person. You're adapting quickly, asking intelligent questions, learning to navigate this world. It's impressive." The praise shouldn't have mattered, but it did, because Adrian Moretti didn't seem like someone who gave empty compliments. "I should get you back," he said, checking his watch. "You have a dress fitting at 3. They rode down to the garage in silence, and Adrian drove her back toward the city. Elena watched the fortress disappear in the side mirror, this place that would soon be her home. "Adrian," she said as they merged onto the highway, "that first night when we met in my father's study, you looked at me like you were assessing an acquisition. What did you see?" He was quiet for long enough that Elena thought he might not answer. Then, "I saw someone smart enough to understand their situation, practical enough to make hard choices, and resilient enough to survive being thrown into deep water. I saw raw material that could become something extraordinary if properly developed. And if it can't, if I'm not who you think I could be, then you'll still leave wealthy and protected after 5 years. You can't fail at this, Elena. You can only succeed to varying degrees." He glanced at her. "But I don't think you're the kind of person who aims for minimum success." He was right about that. Elena had never been someone who did things halfway. If she was going to be Adrian Moretti's wife, she was going to be exceptional at it, or she was going to burn out trying. The dress fitting consumed her afternoon, a designer boutique where everyone knew exactly who she was marrying and treated her accordingly. The wedding dress itself was stunning, all silk and delicate beading, designed to make her look ethereal and untouchable. A virgin bride for the dangerous groom. The irony wasn't lost on her. That evening, alone in her bedroom at her father's house, Elena stood before the mirror wearing the wedding band Adrian had given her. She stacked it against the engagement ring, watching how the diamonds caught the light. In 12 days, she would wear these rings in front of hundreds of people. In 12 days, she would become Elena Moretti. In 12 days, her education and power would become permanent. The encrypted phone buzzed. "Dinner tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Senator's birthday celebration. Wear something blue. His wife loves blue, and it'll score points. A." Even her wardrobe choices were strategic calculations. Elena looked at herself in the mirror, at the girl wearing a wedding band before the wedding, learning to manipulate and deflect and survive in a world of predators. She barely recognized herself, but the woman staring back looked stronger than the girl who'd stood in this same spot a week ago. Harder. more dangerous. Maybe that was the point. "I'll be ready," she typed back, because she would be. Ready for dinner and tests and the constant performance of being Adrian Moretti's perfect partner. Ready for the wedding that would seal her fate. Ready for whatever came after. The girl who studied art history and dreamed of museum internships was gone, buried under contracts and security protocols, and the brutal honesty of a man who saw her as raw material to be refined. In her place, something new was emerging, something sharper, something that understood power as currency and fear as fuel, something that might actually survive the world she was entering. Elena removed the rings and placed them carefully in their boxes. 12 days until the wedding. 12 days to finish becoming whoever she needed to be. The champagne had tasted like surrender, but surrender, she was learning, was just preparation for conquest. And she would conquer or be conquered, but either way, she would never be prey again. The next 12 days blurred together in a cascade of preparation and performance. Elena moved through her final week as Elena Whitmore with the strange detachment of someone watching their own life from a distance. Dress fittings and contract signatures, security briefings and social coaching. Each day another layer of her old self stripped away, replaced with something harder and more precise. The senator's birthday dinner on day 2 taught her that political power smelled like expensive cigars and tasted like aged scotch. She wore sapphire blue as Adrian had instructed and watched as Senator Michael's wife, Patricia, gravitated to her side within minutes of arrival. "Such a lovely choice," Patricia had said, gesturing to Elena's dress. "Blue is so sophisticated on young women. So many of you go for those garish pinks and reds." Elena had smiled and deployed one of Rebecca's deflections. "I've always believed in classic elegance over trendy statements. Though I'm still learning, Adrian has such impeccable taste, I'm trying to rise to his standards. Compliment the husband. Suggest you're learning rather than arrived. Make yourself non-threatening." Patricia had warmed immediately, and within an hour Elena had learned 3 crucial pieces of information. The senator was facing a tight re-election campaign, his chief of staff was having an affair with a lobbyist, and Patricia herself wielded considerable influence over her husband's political positions through carefully orchestrated social pressure. Adrian had caught her eye across the room and given her the slightest nod of approval. She was learning. Day 4 brought self-defense training with an instructor named Sarah Kim, a former military combative specialist who looked like she could break Elena in half without effort. For 2 brutal hours, Sarah taught her how to strike throats and eyes and groins, how to create distance from attackers, how to use car keys as weapons and high heels as clubs. "You're small," Sarah had said bluntly. "That means you don't fight fair. You fight dirty and you fight to escape, not to win. Gouge eyes, bite faces, scream like you're dying. Make yourself too much trouble to be worth grabbing." Elena had practiced the movements until her muscles screamed and her knuckles bled from striking practice pads. She'd gone home bruised and exhausted and strangely exhilarated, because she was learning to hurt back. Day 7 brought the rehearsal dinner, an intimate gathering of only 60 people at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the bay. Elena wore ivory, bridal but not wedding white, and played her role flawlessly. She laughed at appropriate moments, accepted congratulations with grace, and spoke about her impending marriage with a mixture of joy and nervous excitement that was almost entirely fabricated. Almost. Because underneath the performance, something real was developing. Not love. She wasn't naive enough to call it that. But a kind of partnership, a mutual respect for each other's capabilities, and a shared understanding of the game they were playing. Adrian was teaching her to be dangerous, yes, but he was also protecting her, elevating her, giving her tools to survive in his world. And Elena was proving herself worthy of the investment. "You're a natural," Victoria Cross had said during the rehearsal dinner, cornering Elena near the champagne fountain. The PR executive's sharp gray eyes missed nothing. "I watched you work Patricia Michaels at the senator's birthday. Very smooth. Most women your age would have tried too hard or not hard enough. You found exactly the right balance." "I had good coaching," Elena had replied, keeping her voice modest. "Adrian's teaching you well, but he can't teach instinct, and you've got it." Victoria had sipped her champagne thoughtfully. "When you're ready to build your own power base instead of just supporting his, call me. I could use someone like you on my team." The offer had been unexpected and intriguing. Victoria Cross didn't make empty gestures. If she was extending an invitation, it meant she saw genuine potential. Elena had filed that information away for future consideration. By day 10, the wedding had taken on an inevitability that felt less like dread and more like anticipation. The contracts were signed, sealed, and filed with Rebecca's law firm. The dress fit perfectly. The ceremony had been rehearsed until Elena could walk the aisle in her sleep. Her belongings, what little she was bringing from her old life, had been packed and shipped to Adrian's cliffside fortress. All that remained was the performance itself. On day 11, Adrian took her to dinner alone. No business associates, no political contacts, no tests disguised as social events. Just the two of them at a quiet restaurant in North Beach, sitting across from each other in a private corner booth. "Tomorrow," Adrian said, swirling wine in his glass, "you become my wife. How are you feeling about that?" Elena considered the question seriously. Nervous, prepared, strangely calm. Strangely calm? "I think I've processed all the fear already. The terror of being sold, the panic about the threats, the anxiety about failing your tests. I've felt it all over the past 2 weeks, and now—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Now I just feel ready. Like I've been preparing for an exam, and it's finally time to take it." "Marriage isn't an exam, Elena. In your world, everything is an exam." She met his eyes across the candlelight. "You've been testing me constantly. So has everyone around you. And tomorrow, I'll be tested by 300 guests who will be watching to see if Adrian Moretti's young bride is an asset or an embarrassment." Adrian smiled slightly. "And which will you be?" "An asset, obviously." Elena sipped her wine. "I didn't spend 2 weeks learning to deflect and manipulate and fight dirty just to embarrass you at our wedding." "No, you didn't." His expression grew more serious. "I want you to know something before tomorrow. These past 2 weeks, watching you adapt and learn and rise to every challenge, it's been impressive. More than impressive. You've exceeded every expectation I had." The praise sent warmth through her chest. "Thank you. I'm not just saying that to make you feel good. I'm saying it because tomorrow, when we exchange vows in front of all those people, I want you to understand that you've already proven yourself. Whatever happens after this, whatever challenges we face, you've demonstrated that you can handle my world." He leaned forward slightly. "You're going to be an extraordinary partner, Elena. I'm certain of it." "What if I'm not? What if this is just beginner's luck and I fall apart the first time real danger appears?" "Then we'll handle it together. That's what partners do." Adrian's voice was steady, confident. "But you won't fall apart. You're too stubborn for that." Elena laughed despite herself. "Stubborn?" "Absolutely. You've got a core of steel underneath all that careful politeness. I saw it the first time we met, when you asked what would happen if you refused my proposal. Most people in your situation would have just agreed without question. You demanded to understand the full scope of what you were facing." His eyes held hers. "That's not weakness. That's strength pretending to be compliance. And it's exactly what I need in a wife." They finished dinner talking about logistics, final wedding details, the timeline for tomorrow, which guests would need special attention. But underneath the practical discussion, Elena felt something shifting between them. A foundation being built, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Not love, but something that might eventually become it. Adrian drove her home himself, pulling up to her father's house one final time. Tomorrow she would leave this place forever, moving into the fortress on the cliff and into her new life as Elena Moretti. "Sleep well?" Adrian said as she prepared to exit the car. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day." "Adrian," Elena said, turning back before opening the door, "what do you want from this marriage? Really? Not the strategic benefits or the political advantages. What do you actually want?" He was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel, his eyes distant. "I want what I've never had," he said finally. "Someone who sees all of me, the legitimate businessman and the man who operates in shadows and chooses to stand beside me anyway. Someone intelligent enough to challenge me, loyal enough to protect what we build together, and strong enough to survive the inevitable attacks." He looked at her. "I want a real partner, not a trophy wife, not a hostage, not a decoration. A queen who rules beside me, not behind me. And if I want that too, Then we'll build something extraordinary together. His voice was quiet but intense. An empire that lasts beyond us. A legacy that means something. Power that protects rather than destroys. Elena held his gaze, seeing the truth underneath the words. Adrian Moretti was lonely at the top of his empire, surrounded by employees and associates and people who feared him, but lacking anyone who truly understood him. He'd bought her to fill that void, but somewhere in the past 2 weeks, she'd stopped being a purchased solution and started becoming an actual person to him, someone he might genuinely care about. "Good night, Adrian," Elena said softly. "Good night, Elena." She slipped out of the car and walked into her father's house for the last time, feeling the weight of tomorrow pressing down on her like atmospheric pressure before a storm. That night, Elena barely slept. She lay in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, thinking about vows and contracts and the strange man she would marry in less than 12 hours. Her wedding dress hung on the closet door, a ghost in the darkness. The rings sat in their velvet boxes on her nightstand. At dawn, stylists and makeup artists descended on the house, transforming her bedroom into a preparation salon. They worked with military precision, hair pinned and curled and woven with tiny crystals, makeup applied with artistic skill, the dress carefully lifted over her head to avoid disturbing their careful work. By 9 a.m., Elena Whitmore stood before the mirror and barely recognized herself. The woman looking back was ethereal and elegant, her dark hair swept into an elaborate updo, her skin luminous with professional makeup, the silk wedding dress flowing around her like water made solid. She looked older than 20. She looked sophisticated and poised and absolutely beautiful. She looked like someone worthy of being Adrian Moretti's wife. Rebecca arrived at 9:30, dressed in elegant navy and carrying a small gift box. "From Adrian," she said, handing it to Elena. "He asked me to give this to you before the ceremony." Inside was a delicate platinum bracelet set with diamonds and sapphires, something blue for luck, Elena realized, and a note in Adrian's bold handwriting. "For my queen, today we build our empire. A." Elena fastened the bracelet around her wrist with trembling fingers. The weight of it felt significant, symbolic, a gift freely given rather than obligation demanded. "How are you holding up?" Rebecca asked quietly. "I'm ready," Elena said, and meant it. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the gardens of an exclusive estate in Pacific Heights. By 1:30, Elena was in a limousine with her father, who looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo and anxious about his role walking her down the aisle. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud." Elena doubted that. Her mother had believed in love matches and genuine partnership, not transactional arrangements between criminals and desperate men, but she kept that thought to herself. "Thank you, Dad. I know I put you in an impossible situation," Richard continued, words tumbling out in a rush. "I know you're only doing this because of my mistakes, but Adrian's a good man, powerful, yes, and maybe a little dangerous, but he'll take care of you. He'll give you a life I could never provide." "I know. Do you hate me?" The question hung between them in the limousine's leather interior. Elena considered lying, considered offering comfort or forgiveness or the kind of daughterly reassurance that would make this moment easier for them both. But Adrian had taught her the value of brutal honesty. "I don't hate you," Elena said carefully, "but I don't forgive you either. You gambled away everything Mother left us, and when the consequences came, you sold me to make them stop. I understand why you did it. I even understand that you thought you had no choice, but understanding doesn't erase what happened." Richard's face crumpled. "Elena, after today, I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm Adrian Moretti's wife. That's where my loyalty lies now, where my family is, where my future exists. You'll be taken care of financially. Adrian's made sure of that. But we're not going to have a close relationship. We're not going to be the family we were before you destroyed it. Please. This is me being honest with you one last time before I walk down that aisle and become someone else entirely." Elena's voice was firm, but not cruel. "You made your choices. I've made mine. And we both have to live with the consequences." The limousine pulled up to the estate, and Elena could see the elaborate setup through the tinted windows. White roses everywhere, hundreds of guests in elegant formal wear, Photographers positioned to capture every moment. A spectacle designed to announce to San Francisco's elite that Adrian Moretti had claimed a bride. "It's time," the driver said, opening Elena's door. Rebecca was waiting, along with two attendants who would carry her train. Her father climbed out the other side, looking devastated but functional. "Last chance to run," Rebecca murmured with a slight smile as she adjusted Elena's veil. "I'm not running." "Good, because Adrian's waiting for you, and he looks like a man who's ready to claim his queen." They moved toward the ceremony space, Elena's heart pounding in counterpoint to the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. Through the gauze of her veil, she could see the assembled guests, hundreds of them, the most powerful people in San Francisco, all turned to watch her approach. And at the end of the white-carpeted aisle, standing before an arch of white roses with the officiant beside him, was Adrian. He wore a black tuxedo that made him look like elegant violence barely contained. His eyes found hers across the distance, and even through the veil, Elena felt the intensity of his gaze. This was it. The moment that would transform her from Elena Whitmore into Elena Moretti. The music shifted to Wagner's bridal chorus, and Elena began the long walk down the aisle on her father's arm. Each step was measured, deliberate. She'd practiced this walk a dozen times, knew exactly how to move to make the dress flow perfectly, how to hold her head to look both modest and confident. She smiled at the guests as she passed, Senator Michaels and Patricia, Victoria Cross watching with sharp assessment, business associates and political figures and people whose names carried weight and power. All of them watching her, all of them judging whether Adrian Moretti had chosen well. Elena reached the altar, and her father lifted her veil with shaking hands, kissing her cheek before placing her hand in Adrian's and stepping back. Adrian's fingers closed around hers, warm and steady and absolutely certain. "You're stunning," he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. "You clean up well yourself," Elena whispered back. A slight smile touched his lips, and then the officiant began speaking about love and commitment and the sacred bonds of marriage. The words washed over Elena like water, beautiful and traditional, and utterly disconnected from the reality of what she and Adrian were actually doing. This wasn't a sacred bond of love. This was a strategic alliance being dressed up as romance. But when the officiant asked if she, Elena Marie Whitmore, took Adrian James Moretti to be her lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death did them part, Elena's voice was clear and strong. "I do." Adrian's grip on her hand tightened slightly, and when the officiant asked the same of Adrian, his response was equally firm. "I do." The rings were produced, Elena's wedding band, and Adrian's matching platinum ring. She slid the band onto his finger with steady hands, feeling the significance of the gesture. He was hers now, in whatever complicated way that meant. And when Adrian slid her wedding band into place, stacking it against the engagement ring, Elena felt the full weight of what had just happened. She was married. She was Elena Moretti. "By the power vested in me by the state of California," the officiant proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Adrian's hands came up to frame her face with unexpected gentleness. His eyes held hers for a moment, a silent question, a request for permission even now. Elena gave the slightest nod, and then Adrian kissed her. It was their first kiss, chaste and relatively brief, appropriate for a wedding ceremony in front of 300 guests. But Elena felt electricity shoot through her at the contact, at the firm press of his lips against hers, at the possessive certainty in the way he held her face. When he pulled back, his eyes held heat she'd never seen before. "My wife," he said quietly. "My husband," Elena replied, and the guests erupted in applause. They turned to face the crowd together, Adrian's arms sliding around her waist in the now familiar gesture of possession and protection. Photographers captured the moment, the powerful crime lord and his young bride, smiling and perfect and absolutely convincing as a couple in love. The recessional music began and they walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife. Guests threw rose petals that caught in Elena's dress and hair. Cameras flashed. People called congratulations. Elena smiled and waved and played her part flawlessly. But inside she felt a strange mixture of triumph and terror. She'd done it. She'd married Adrian Moretti. And now the real test began. The reception was held in an enormous tent on the estate grounds, decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers and enough elegance to fund a small country's GDP. Elena and Adrian made their entrance to thunderous applause, had their first dance to a song the wedding planner had chosen, and then separated to work the room. Because this wasn't a celebration. This was networking. Elena moved through the crowd with Rebecca at her elbow, a glass of champagne in her hand that she barely touched, greeting guests and accepting congratulations and gathering intelligence with every conversation. "Mrs. Moretti," Victoria Cross said, appearing at her side with a predatory smile. "How does it feel to be officially part of the empire?" "Like stepping into a role I was born to play," Elena replied smoothly. "Though I'm sure I'll be learning from women like you who've navigated these circles for years." Compliment and deflect. Make yourself seem teachable rather than threatening. Victoria's smile sharpened with approval. Smart. Most new brides come in thinking they know everything because they landed a powerful husband. You're actually paying attention to the women who hold real influence. "My husband is powerful," Elena said carefully, "but power has many forms. I'd be foolish to ignore the people who wield it in ways different from his." "Very smart." Victoria clinked her champagne glass against Elena's. "I meant what I said at the rehearsal dinner. When you're ready to build your own power base, I can help with that. Adrian's influence opens doors, but you need to be capable of walking through them on your own." "I'll remember that," Elena said. Senator Michaels approached next, his wife Patricia beaming beside him. "Congratulations, my dear. Adrian is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Elena replied, deploying the modest deflection Rebecca had taught her. "Marrying into such an accomplished family is both an honor and a tremendous responsibility." "Well said, well said." The senator clapped Adrian on the shoulder as he rejoined Elena's side. "You've chosen well, Moretti. Intelligence and beauty. A rare combination." "I'm very aware of how fortunate I am," Adrian said, his hand settling on Elena's waist. "Though I suspect my wife will prove to be far more than beautiful and intelligent. She has depths I'm still discovering." It was the right thing to say, suggesting genuine partnership rather than trophy wife. Elena saw approval register on faces around them. They were selling the performance perfectly. But as the evening wore on, Elena noticed something odd. Adrian's security chief, Michael Ross, kept appearing in her peripheral vision, his expression tense. Other security personnel moved through the crowd with increased frequency. Something was wrong. She caught Michael's eye across the room and he gave her the slightest shake of his head. Not here. Not now. But something was definitely happening. Adrian noticed too. She felt him tense beside her, saw his eyes track Michael's movements. "Smile," Adrian murmured in her ear. "We have a situation, but we can't show it." Elena's heart began to race, but she kept her expression pleasant and interested as an elderly woman complimented her dress. "What kind of situation?" she whispered back when they had a moment of relative privacy. "The kind that requires careful management. Just stay close to me and let security handle it." They moved through the reception, cutting the cake and toasting with champagne and accepting congratulations, while underneath the celebration, security personnel moved with increasing urgency. Finally, during what should have been a quiet moment before the bouquet toss, Michael appeared at Adrian's side and whispered something urgent in his ear. Adrian's expression didn't change, but Elena felt him go absolutely still beside her. "Take her to the secure room," Adrian said quietly. "Now." "What's happening?" Elena demanded. "Probably nothing. Possibly something." Adrian turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face in a gesture that would look affectionate to anyone watching. "Michael is going to take you to a secure location in the estate. You'll stay there until I come get you. No arguments." "Adrian, this is the part where you trust me." His eyes held hers intensely. "I promise to protect you. Let me do that." Before Elena could respond, Michael was at her elbow, guiding her away from the reception with the professional smoothness of someone who'd done this many times before. To any observer, it would look like the bride was being escorted to freshen up or take a break from the festivities. But Elena felt the tension in Michael's grip on her arm, saw the way his other hand stayed near his jacket, where she knew he carried a weapon. They moved through the estate's main house, down a corridor, through a door that required a key card, and into a windowless room that looked like a miniature bunker. Monitors showed feeds from security cameras around the property. Communications equipment lined one wall. Two other security personnel were already inside, watching the screens with focused intensity. "What's happening?" Elena asked again as Michael sealed the door behind them. "We detected two unauthorized individuals on the property perimeter," Michael said, moving to the monitors. "They were conducting surveillance on the reception tent. When our team moved to intercept, they disappeared into the surrounding neighborhood." "Could be nothing," one of the other security personnel said. "Paparazzi trying to get photos for tabloids." "Could be," Michael agreed. "But given the guest list at this wedding, we're not taking chances. You stay here until we've cleared the property and confirmed there's no active threat." Elena sank into a chair, her wedding dress pooling around her like sea foam, and watched the monitors showing her own reception continuing without her. Guests mingled and danced. Adrian moved through the crowd, his expression calm and controlled, giving no indication that his bride had just been whisked to a secure location. This was her new reality. Weddings interrupted by security threats. Celebrations that doubled as potential danger zones. A life where two unauthorized individuals on a property perimeter triggered full lockdown protocols. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt oddly calm. Because this was exactly what Adrian had prepared her for. This was why Michael had taught her surveillance awareness and security protocols. This was why the house on the cliff had panic rooms and armed guards. This was the world she'd married into. And she was ready for it. 30 minutes passed. Then 45. On the monitors, Elena watched the reception continue, watched Adrian give a speech she couldn't hear, watched guests begin departing in the early evening light. Finally, the door opened and Adrian entered, still in his tuxedo but with his tie loosened and tension evident in his shoulders. "We're clear," he said. "Paparazzi. Just paparazzi trying to get exclusive photos they could sell." Michael's team verified their credentials and sent them on their way with a warning about trespassing. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "So, no actual threat?" "Not this time." Adrian moved to where she sat and crouched down so they were eye level. "But this is what our life looks like, Elena. False alarms and real threats and never being entirely certain which is which until after the fact. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Surprisingly fine, actually." Elena met his eyes. "I wasn't even that scared. I just did what Michael taught me. Got to a secure location, stayed calm, waited for the all clear." Something that looked like pride crossed Adrian's face. "You're extraordinary. You know that?" "I'm learning." "No, you are extraordinary." He stood and offered his hand. "Come on, the guests have mostly gone home. Let's get out of here." Elena took his hand and rose, the wedding dress rustling around her. They walked back through the estate together, hand in hand, husband and wife leaving their wedding reception early because of a security scare that turned out to be nothing. Welcome to Marriage with Adrian Moretti. The drive to the cliffside fortress was quiet, both of them processing the day's events. Elena watched the city lights blur past the car windows, the wedding bouquet in her lap, the rings heavy on her finger. She was married. The reality of it was finally sinking in. When they arrived at the house, Adrian led her upstairs to the master suite without ceremony. The room had been prepared. Candles lit, champagne chilling, rose petals scattered across the bed, in a gesture toward romance that felt almost absurd given the circumstances. "Staff trying to be thoughtful," Adrian said dryly, gesturing to the romantic setup. "I can have them clear it if it makes you uncomfortable." "It's fine." Elena set down her bouquet and turned to face him. "Adrian, what happens now?" "Now you change out of that dress before you destroy it, and we figure out what we both need from tonight." His voice was steady, giving her control. "I'm not going to demand anything from you, Elena. We can sleep in separate rooms if that's what you want. We can sleep in the same bed without touching. We can—" "I want to stay in the same bed," Elena said quietly. Not for anything physical, but because I don't want to be alone tonight. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Adrian moved to his closet and emerged with comfortable clothes, soft pants and a t-shirt. "Bathroom's through there. Take your time." Elena escaped into the bathroom and spent 20 minutes removing the elaborate dress, the pins from her hair, the professional makeup. She emerged in the comfortable clothes Adrian had provided, her hair loose and damp from washing her face, feeling more like herself than she had all day. Adrian had changed too and cleared the rose petals from the bed. He stood by the windows overlooking the Pacific, the moonlight turning the waves silver. "Come here," he said quietly. Elena crossed to him, and they stood together looking out at the ocean. "We did it," Adrian said. "We're married. You're officially Elena Moretti now." "How does it feel?" Elena asked. "Having a wife?" "Strange, significant, right." He turned to face her. "How does it feel being married?" "Terrifying, exciting, like I've stepped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm falling or flying. That's an accurate description of life with me." Adrian's hand came up to brush a strand of damp hair from her face. "Thank you for today, for playing your role perfectly, for handling the security scare with grace, for becoming my wife without falling apart. Thank you for giving me the tools to survive it." They climbed into bed on opposite sides, the California king large enough that they could sleep without touching if they wanted. Adrian killed the lights, and darkness filled the room except for moonlight through the windows. Elena lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of Adrian's presence beside her. Her husband. This dangerous, complicated man who'd bought her and taught her and married her in front of 300 witnesses. "Adrian?" she said into the darkness. "Yes?" "I'm glad it's you. If I had to marry someone I didn't choose, I'm glad it's you." Silence for a moment. Then his hand found hers in the darkness, fingers interlacing. "I'm glad it's you too," Adrian said quietly. "Sleep, Elena. Tomorrow we start building our empire." Elena fell asleep holding her husband's hand, the rings on her finger catching the moonlight, the waves crashing against the cliffs below. She was Elena Moretti now. And the real game was just beginning. The game she hadn't known she was playing until she'd already begun to win. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the sound of waves crashing against cliffs 200 feet below. For a disoriented moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the weight of the rings on her finger registered, and reality crashed back. She was married. She was in Adrian's house, her house now, she supposed. She was Elena Moretti. Adrian's side of the bed was empty, the sheets cool to the touch. He'd been up for hours, probably. Elena checked the time on her phone, the encrypted one Michael had given her, and saw it was already past 9 a.m. She'd slept for nearly 10 hours. A note sat on Adrian's pillow, written in his bold handwriting. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti. Coffee and breakfast in the kitchen when you're ready. I'm in my office handling some business that couldn't wait. Come find me when you wake. A." Elena showered in the enormous marble bathroom, dressed in comfortable clothes from the closet that now held her belongings alongside Adrian's, and made her way downstairs. The house felt different in daylight, less fortress, more home, still intimidating with its expensive art and precise design, but sunlight softened the edges. She found the kitchen, a chef's dream of stainless steel and Italian marble, where coffee was indeed waiting in a French press alongside a spread of pastries, fresh fruit, and what looked like a perfectly prepared omelet keeping warm. A woman in her 50s appeared from somewhere, smiling professionally. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti. I'm Catherine, the house manager. Mr. Moretti asked me to make sure you had everything you needed this morning." "Thank you, Catherine." Elena poured coffee, feeling strange about being served in what was supposed to be her own home. "Is Adrian still in his office?" "Yes, ma'am. He asked me to let you know he'd be available whenever you were ready to see him." Elena ate breakfast alone at the kitchen island, watching morning light play across the Pacific, processing the surreal reality of her new life. Yesterday she'd been Elena Whitmore, college student with crushing family debt and no future. Today she was Elena Moretti, wife of one of the most powerful men in San Francisco, living in a cliffside fortress with staff and security and more money than she could comprehend. The transformation should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt incomplete. Because the real test wasn't marrying Adrian. It was proving she could survive and thrive in his world beyond the wedding ceremony. She found Adrian's office on the main floor, the door slightly ajar. She knocked softly before entering. Adrian sat behind his massive desk, laptop open, phone to his ear, conducting business with the focused intensity she was learning was his default state. He saw her enter and held up one finger. "Give me a minute." Elena settled into a leather chair by the windows and waited, studying him while he finished his call. He'd traded the tuxedo for dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with lean muscle. He looked like power personified, every word deliberate, every gesture controlled. I don't care about his excuses, Adrian said into the phone, his voice cold. The shipment was supposed to arrive Tuesday. It's Friday. That's unacceptable. Pause. Then fire him and find someone competent. I'm not paying for incompetence. He ended the call without ceremony and turned his full attention to Elena. Good morning. Did you sleep well? Surprisingly well. Elena curled into the chair. What was that about? Shipping delays in one of my logistics operations. Someone decided deadlines were negotiable. Adrian closed his laptop. They're learning otherwise. You fired someone the morning after your wedding? Business doesn't stop for personal milestones. Besides, incompetence is expensive. Better to cut it out quickly than let it spread. He stood and moved to sit on the edge of his desk, closer to her. How are you feeling? Really? Elena considered the question. Strange. Like I'm waiting for something to happen. The wedding felt like this enormous buildup, and now it's over and I'm not sure what comes next. What comes next is learning to actually live this life, instead of just preparing for it. Adrian studied her with those smoke-dark eyes. The performance is over, Elena. Now comes the reality. Which is what exactly? Learning the business. Meeting the people who actually run my operations. Understanding how legitimate enterprises and shadow networks connect. Becoming genuinely useful instead of just decorative, he paused. Unless you'd prefer to be a traditional trophy wife, spend your days shopping and having lunch with other wealthy women, stay out of my business entirely. Is that what you want? I told you what I want. A partner. A queen. Someone who can help me run this empire instead of just benefit from it. Adrian's expression was serious. But that only works if you genuinely want it too. If you'd rather have a comfortable, passive life, I'll respect that choice. You'll still have everything the contracts promise, but you won't have real power. Elena thought about Victoria Cross and her offer to help build an independent power base, about Rebecca Chen and her sharp legal mind, about Patricia Michaels wielding influence through social pressure. These women had found ways to matter, to make impact, to be more than decorative accessories to powerful men. I want to learn the business, Elena said firmly. All of it. The legitimate parts and the shadow parts. I want to understand how your empire actually functions. Adrian smiled, genuine pleasure lighting his features. Good. Then your education continues. He moved back to his desk and pulled up something on his laptop. Come here, I want to show you something. Elena crossed to stand beside him, looking at the screen. It showed what appeared to be an organizational chart, complex networks of companies and subsidiaries, all connecting back to central nodes. This is the structure of Moretti Holdings, Adrian explained, pointing to different sections. On the surface, I run legitimate businesses, shipping companies, real estate developments, technology investments, private security firms, all completely legal, all profitable, all paying taxes and following regulations. But, Elena prompted, but underneath that legitimate structure is a network of operations that exist in gray spaces. Not quite legal, not quite illegal. We move products that certain people need moved without asking too many questions. We provide security services that sometimes cross into intimidation. We make loans to people banks won't touch, at rates that would make regulators uncomfortable. His finger traced connections between companies. The legitimate businesses provide cover and cash flow. The shadow operations provide leverage and information. That's why you needed a wife, Elena said, understanding clicking into place. The legitimate businesses expand faster when you look stable and respectable. Boards prefer married CEOs. Political connections favor traditional family structures. Exactly. You're not just my wife, Elena. You're the face I present to the world that says Adrian Moretti is settling down, becoming legitimate, transitioning from shadow operations to respectable business. He looked at her. Which is partially true. I am legitimizing more of my operations, but I'm not abandoning the shadow networks. I'm just getting better at hiding them. And where do I fit in this structure? Adrian pulled up a different screen showing financial accounts and corporate entities. You have direct ownership stakes in several of my legitimate businesses now. The trust I established for you holds shares in the real estate development company, the technology investment fund, and the private security firm. You're not just my wife. You're a shareholder, a board member, an actual participant in these operations. Elena stared at the numbers. Millions of dollars in assets, all in her name, all giving her genuine power within Adrian's empire. "Why give me this much?" she asked quietly. "Because trapped people are liabilities, remember? You need to have enough independent power that you're choosing to partner with me, not forced to." Adrian closed the laptop. "Over the next few months, you'll learn how each business functions. You'll attend board meetings, meet department heads, understand the operations, and then you'll start making decisions: where to invest, which opportunities to pursue, how to expand our influence." Our influence. That's what marriage means in this world. What I build, you benefit from. What you build, I support. We rise together or we fall together. His eyes held hers. "I'm betting we rise." For the next several hours, Adrian walked Elena through the intricate architecture of his empire. She learned about shipping routes and customs arrangements, real estate holdings across 3 states, technology startups that Moretti Holdings had funded in exchange for controlling interests. She met department heads via video calls, serious professionals who treated her with cautious respect, clearly uncertain whether the boss's new young wife was an actual player or just window dressing. Elena made sure they left those calls knowing she was the former. She asked pointed questions about profit margins and regulatory compliance. She identified potential vulnerabilities in supply chains and suggested diversification strategies. She proved that she'd been paying attention during her crash course in business and power. By early afternoon, Adrian looked at her with undisguised approval. "You're a natural at this." "I'm terrified I'm going to say something stupid and embarrass you," Elena admitted. "You won't. And even if you did, these people work for me. They'll adjust their expectations to reality pretty quickly." He stood and stretched, rolling his shoulders. "Come on, you've been staring at screens all morning. Let's take a break." He led her outside to the cantilevered pool overlooking the Pacific. The water was heated despite the cool coastal air, steam rising from the surface. They sat on lounge chairs in the sun, and for the first time since the wedding, Elena felt herself relax slightly. "Tell me about the threats," she said suddenly. "The real ones, not theoretical security briefings. What are we actually facing?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, weighing how much truth to share. Then, "I have 3 primary enemies right now. First is a rival organization run by a man named Victor Castellano. We've been competing for territory in shipping and logistics for 5 years. He sees my legitimization efforts as weakness and has been making moves to absorb some of my operations." "Is he dangerous?" "Very. Victor doesn't believe in subtle solutions. If he decides you're a valuable target, he'll act decisively and violently." Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. "Second enemy is the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. They've been investigating my operations for 3 years without finding anything prosecutable. But they're persistent, and they'd love to flip someone close to me." "Like a wife." "Like a wife. That's why you have Rebecca as your lawyer and why everything we discuss is carefully structured to avoid criminal liability." He paused. "The third enemy is more complicated. Marcus Webb, a former business partner who believes I betrayed him when I chose to legitimize certain operations. He's been systematically trying to damage my reputation with political contacts and business associates. Can he succeed? Not as long as I maintain my current alliances, but he's patient and well-funded, which makes him dangerous in different ways than Victor." Adrian turned to look at her. "These are the men who would use you to hurt me if they got the chance. This is why security isn't optional." Elena processed this information. 3 distinct threats, each requiring different strategies to counter. "What do you need me to do?" "Be vigilant. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." Adrian's hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "And don't underestimate yourself. You've already proven you can handle pressure better than most people in my world. Trust that capability." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Elena's mind churning through everything she'd learned. The empire was larger and more complex than she'd imagined. The threats were real and immediate, and her role was genuinely significant, not decorative but functional. She was becoming exactly what Adrian had promised to make her. The next 3 weeks established a rhythm. Mornings, Elena attended meetings and learned the business operations. Afternoons, she worked with Rebecca on legal structures or with Michael on security awareness. Evenings, she and Adrian attended social events together, charity galas, political fundraisers, business dinners, where she deployed everything she'd learned about social manipulation and information gathering. She was good at it, better than good. Within 2 weeks, Victoria Cross called her directly. "I'm hearing interesting things about you, Elena. You're making quite an impression." "Just trying to support my husband's work," Elena demurred. "Don't give me that modest wife routine. I know manipulation when I see it, and you're getting very good at working a room." Victoria's voice held approval. "Patricia Michaels mentioned you identified a potential scandal in the senator's campaign before his own staff caught it. And I heard you brokered a deal between 2 competing tech CEOs at the Innovation Gala that had both of them thinking it was their idea." Elena smiled. She had done both those things, using skills Rebecca had taught her about reading people and guiding conversations toward mutually beneficial outcomes. "I'm learning from the best," Elena said. "You're becoming one of the best. That's different." Victoria paused. "My offer still stands. When you're ready to build something that's yours, not Adrian's, not connected to his empire, but genuinely yours, I can help with that. I'll keep that in mind." After the call ended, Elena sat in her office staring out at the Pacific, turning Victoria's words over in her mind. Build something that's yours. The idea was intoxicating. She had power now, yes, but all of it was derivative of Adrian's position. What would it look like to create something independent? She was still thinking about it that evening when Adrian arrived home from a business trip to Los Angeles. He found her in her office, surrounded by notes and research. "What are you working on?" he asked, kissing her forehead in greeting, a gesture that had become casual and comfortable between them. "An idea." Elena turned her laptop to show him. "I've been researching opportunities in the nonprofit sector, specifically programs that help young women from disadvantaged backgrounds access education and job training." Adrian studied the screen, his expression unreadable. "Why this?" "Because I was one bad decision away from being destroyed by my father's debts. If you hadn't intervened, I would have been exactly the kind of vulnerable young woman these programs serve." Elena met his eyes. "I have resources now. I have your name and connections and actual capital in my trust. I want to use it to help people who are where I was." "This would be your project, separate from my business operations?" "Yes, completely separate. I'd fund it initially from my trust, build a board of directors, establish it as an independent nonprofit. You wouldn't need to be involved at all if you didn't want to be." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying her with that intense gaze that seemed to see everything. Then he smiled, genuine warmth lighting his features. "Do it," he said. "This is exactly what I wanted from you. Independent thinking, strategic vision, using your position to build something meaningful." He pulled up a chair beside her. "Let me help you structure it properly. We'll set it up so it's clearly yours, but we can leverage my connections to attract donors and board members." They spent the evening planning together, Elena outlining her vision, while Adrian provided strategic guidance on structure and funding. By midnight, they had a preliminary plan for the Elena Moretti Foundation, an organization focused on education, job training, and financial literacy for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. "You're building a legacy," Adrian said as they climbed the stairs to bed. "Something that lasts beyond business deals and quarterly earnings." "Is that what you want? A legacy?" "Eventually. Right now I'm focused on consolidating power and neutralizing threats. But long term? Yes. I want to build something that matters beyond my own lifetime." He paused at the bedroom door. "Children would be part of that. Eventually." The topic of children had been carefully avoided for weeks. They'd settled into a comfortable physical proximity, sharing a bed, casual affection, occasional kisses, but nothing more intimate. Both of them seemed to understand they were building a foundation first, letting genuine connection develop before adding that complexity. "How do you feel about that?" Elena asked quietly. "Actually being a father?" "Terrified. Responsible, determined to do better than my own father did." Adrian's voice was uncharacteristically vulnerable. "My father saw me as a tool to expand his power. I want to be different. I want children who are valued for themselves, not just for what they can contribute to an empire." "What was your father like?" "Cruel, strategic, brilliant in his way, but fundamentally empty. He built an empire and died alone because he'd driven away everyone who might have cared about him. Adrian moved to the windows, looking out at the dark ocean. I learned everything about power from him, and everything about its limitations. Elena crossed to stand beside him, their reflections ghostly in the dark glass. Is that why you wanted a real partner? Because you saw what happened to him? Partially. I watched him destroy everything except his business operations, and even those fractured after his death because he had no one he trusted to maintain them. I inherited some of his empire, but most of it scattered to competitors and former associates. Adrian turned to face her. I don't want that ending. I want to build something sustainable, something that continues beyond me. And that requires actual partnership, not just subordinates and employees. You're building that now, with me. We're building it together. His hand came up to cup her face. You've exceeded every expectation I had, Elena. You've become someone genuinely formidable in your own right. I had a good teacher. You had raw material I could work with, but the transformation is yours. You chose to become this person. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I'm proud of you. The words hit harder than Elena expected. Proud. Not pleased or satisfied or approving. Proud, like she was someone whose accomplishments genuinely mattered to him. She reached up to cover his hand with hers. Adrian, I think we're actually becoming something real. Not just an arrangement or a strategic partnership. Something more. I know. His voice was quiet. I felt it too. Does that frighten you? Yes. Because it's a vulnerability I didn't account for. His eyes held hers. I expected to respect you, to value your capabilities. I didn't expect to actually care about you as a person. That complicates things. Complicates them how? Because now you're not just an asset to protect. You're someone whose happiness matters to me. Someone I don't want to hurt. He pulled her closer, his other hand settling on her waist. I'm very good at business, Elena. I'm very good at strategy and power. But I'm not good at caring about people. It's a weakness I've systematically eliminated from most areas of my life. And now I'm trying to figure out how to care about you without it destroying what we've built. His forehead rested against hers. Because I do care, more than is probably strategic or safe. Elena felt her heart beating hard against her ribs. This was it. The moment where their carefully constructed arrangement transformed into something genuine and dangerous and real. I care about you too, she whispered. I didn't expect to. I thought I'd tolerate this marriage, learn what I could, and leave when the 5 years were up. But somewhere in the past month, you became more than just the man I was forced to marry. What did I become? Someone I choose to stand beside, every day. Someone I want to build an empire with, not because I have to, but because I genuinely want to see what we can create together. Adrian kissed her then, not the chaste wedding kiss or the casual greeting pecks that had become routine. This was deep and hungry and full of genuine emotion. Elena melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body pressed against his. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adrian's eyes were dark with heat and something deeper. Stay with me, he said quietly, not because of contracts or arrangements. Choose to stay. I already have, Elena said. Every morning I wake up in your bed. Every evening I come back to this house. Every moment I could walk away and don't. I'm choosing you, Adrian. I have been for weeks. Even knowing what I am, what my world requires. Especially knowing that. Because you've never lied to me. You've shown me the darkness and the danger and the reality of what this life entails. And I've decided I'd rather face that darkness with you than be safe and ordinary anywhere else. They made love that night for the first time, not because obligation demanded it or because contracts required it, but because genuine desire and real emotion had finally aligned. And afterward, lying tangled together in the dark with the sound of waves crashing below, Elena felt something shift fundamentally in her understanding of their relationship. This wasn't a transaction anymore. This was a partnership, a marriage, real and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. But the universe, as Elena was learning, didn't allow happiness to exist without testing it. 3 days later, while Elena was at a foundation planning meeting downtown, Michael Ross called her encrypted phone. Mrs. Moretti, we have a situation. I need you to stay exactly where you are. Security is on the way to you now. Elena's training kicked in immediately. What kind of situation? Victor Castellano's people just made a move against one of Mr. Moretti's shipping operations. We've contained it, but we're worried about secondary targets. You're in an unsecured location. We're extracting you now. Two security personnel appeared at the conference room door within minutes. The Foundation board members looked alarmed as Elena stood, apologizing for the interruption. Family emergency, she said smoothly, deploying Rebecca's training. I'll be in touch to reschedule. They moved her to the secure SUV quickly and professionally. Elena's heart raced, but her hands were steady as she buckled in. Where's Adrian? She asked. At the shipping terminal, handling the situation directly. The security agent's voice was tense. He wanted you secured first. They drove toward the cliffside house through afternoon traffic, and Elena watched the city slide past, her mind calculating possibilities. Victor Castellano had finally made his move. This was the real threat Adrian had warned her about, materializing after weeks of relative peace. Halfway to the house, the driver cursed. We've got a tail. Black sedan. 2 cars back. Elena's pulse spiked. Lose them. Working on it, ma'am. The SUV accelerated, weaving through traffic with practiced skill. Elena gripped the door handle, watching the black sedan keep pace with them. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was actual danger, actual pursuit. Call Michael, Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear flooding her system. Tell him we're being followed and get us backup. The security agent was already on the phone, but before backup could arrive, the black sedan accelerated hard, pulling alongside them. Elena caught a glimpse of the driver, cold eyes, professional focus, before he swerved hard into their vehicle. The impact threw them sideways. Their driver fought for control, barely avoiding a collision with a parked car. The black sedan came at them again, clearly trying to force them off the road. Hold on, the driver shouted. Everything Elena had learned from Sarah Kim flooded back. If they crashed, if she was grabbed, she fought like hell and didn't stop fighting. She mentally cataloged her resources, her phone, her keys, the knowledge of vulnerable targets. The black sedan hit them again, and this time their SUV spun, tires screeching, and slammed into a streetlight pole. The airbag exploded in Elena's face, and for a moment she couldn't see or breathe or think. Then training overrode panic. She fumbled with her seatbelt, hands shaking, trying to get free. The security agents were both stunned but moving. Through the cracked windshield, Elena saw 2 men emerging from the black sedan, moving toward them with purposeful intent. Go! One of the agents shouted at her. Get out and run! Elena threw open her door and stumbled out into the street. Her legs felt like rubber, her face stinging from the airbag impact. Behind her, she heard the security agents engaging the attackers, shouts and the sounds of physical struggle. She ran. Not gracefully, not fast, but she ran down the San Francisco street in the middle of the afternoon, her phone clutched in one hand, her other hand already dialing the number Michael had made her memorize. I'm being chased, Elena gasped when he answered. Our SUV crashed. 2 men from a black sedan are after me. I'm running east on... She checked the street sign. Divisadero, heading toward the park. Stay on the line. I'm tracking your phone. Backup is 3 minutes out. 3 minutes. Elena could hear footsteps behind her, gaining. She risked a glance back and saw one of the men from the sedan, moving faster than she could run, his expression professionally blank. She wasn't going to outrun him, so she did what Sarah had taught her. She found a weapon. A construction site sat at the next corner, scaffolding and equipment and a pile of metal rods. Elena grabbed one as she passed, the weight of it reassuring in her hands. When the man grabbed her from behind, arms wrapping around her waist to lift her off the ground, Elena didn't scream. She drove the metal rod backward with everything she had, aiming for the soft tissue of his inner thigh. Felt it connect. Heard him grunt in pain and surprise. His grip loosened just enough. Elena twisted, dropped her weight, and drove her elbow up into his face with all the force Sarah had drilled into her. Felt cartilage crunch under the impact. The man staggered back, blood streaming from his nose, and Elena ran again, still clutching the metal rod. Where are you? She gasped into the phone. 30 seconds. Stay on the line. The man behind her recovered faster than she'd hoped. She heard him coming again, cursing now in a language she didn't recognize. Elena turned a corner into an alley. Mistake. Dead end. Nowhere to run. She spun to face him, the metal rod raised like a club. You're going to regret this, the man said, blood still dripping from his face. Victor wants you alive, but he didn't say undamaged. Come get me then, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. He advanced. Elena swung the rod with everything she had, aiming for his head. He blocked it with his forearm, clearly trained in combat, and grabbed the rod, trying to wrench it from her hands. She let go. Threw herself forward instead, driving her knee up toward his groin, just like Sarah had taught her. Connected. Heard him wheeze. Raked her keys across his face with her other hand, targeting his eyes. He released the rod to protect his face, and Elena grabbed it again, swinging wildly, keeping him off balance. And then sirens filled the air, and 2 SUVs screamed into the alley entrance, and Michael Ross was running toward her with armed security personnel fanning out behind him. The man who'd been attacking Elena took one look at the overwhelming force and ran the other direction. Michael's team pursued, while Michael himself reached Elena. Are you hurt? He demanded, his hands already checking her for injuries with professional efficiency. Airbag to the face, some bruises, but I fought him off. Elena was shaking now, adrenaline crashing through her system. I actually fought him off. You did more than that. Michael looked at the blood on the ground, the dropped metal rod, the clear evidence of serious combat. You did exactly what we trained you to do. You fought like hell, and you didn't stop fighting. Sarah's going to be proud. They got her to a secure location, not the house on the cliff, but a safe house Michael maintained for exactly these situations. Medical personnel checked her over, confirming nothing was broken despite the impressive bruises developing across her ribs and face. And then Adrian arrived. He moved through the safe house like a hurricane, his expression absolutely murderous until he saw Elena sitting on a medical examination table with an ice pack pressed to her face. You're alive, he said, his voice rough with emotion he wasn't even trying to hide. I'm alive. Elena stood on shaky legs and walked to him. Adrian, I fought them. They tried to grab me and I actually fought back. He pulled her into his arms with a desperation that spoke of genuine fear. I know. Michael sent me the phone recording. I heard everything. His voice was muffled against her hair. You were magnificent. I was terrified. You were terrified and you fought anyway. That's courage, Elena. Real courage. They stood like that for a long moment, Adrian holding her like she might disappear if he let go, Elena shaking with delayed shock and adrenaline crash. Victor Castellano did this, Adrian said finally, pulling back to look at her face. This was him sending a message. What message? That he's willing to escalate beyond business competition into personal attacks. That no one in my life is safe. Adrian's voice went cold and hard. It was a mistake. What are you going to do? End this. Permanently. Adrian's eyes held hers. I've been trying to handle Victor carefully, to neutralize his operations without triggering all-out war. But he just crossed a line. He came after you. That changes everything. Over the next 72 hours, Elena watched her husband systematically dismantle Victor Castellanos' empire with the cold precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. Business contracts were terminated. Political allies were reminded of old debts and new allegiances. Financial pressure was applied through channels Elena was only beginning to understand. And at the center of it all, Adrian moved with absolute certainty. This is what I am, he told Elena on the second night, both of them working late in his office at the safe house. When someone threatens what's mine, I eliminate the threat completely. No half measures, no mercy, no second chances. I'm not asking you to show mercy, Elena said. He tried to have me kidnapped. I want him destroyed. Adrian looked at her with something like pride. You're learning to think like a predator. You taught me well. By the fourth day, Victor Castellanos' shipping operations had collapsed. His financial backing had evaporated, and several of his key personnel had mysteriously decided to retire or relocate. The man himself was facing a sudden IRS audit and multiple lawsuits from former partners. He was finished. And the message to Adrian's other enemies was clear. Attacking his wife was a fatal mistake. They returned to the cliffside house under heavy security, and that evening, sitting on the terrace overlooking the Pacific, Adrian opened a bottle of very expensive wine. To my wife, he said, raising his glass, who fought off attackers with a metal rod and car keys, who helped me destroy an enemy, Who's proven herself more formidable than most of the professionals I employ? Elena raised her own glass. To my husband, who went to war for me. I'll always go to war for you. Adrian's voice was absolutely serious. You're mine to protect. Anyone who touches you answers to me. They drank, and Elena felt the truth of his words settling into her bones. She was protected. She was valued. She was genuinely loved by this dangerous, complicated man who'd bought her, and then taught her how to be dangerous herself. I don't want to leave after 5 years, Elena said quietly. Adrian went very still. What? The exit clause in our contract. After 5 years, I can leave with everything intact. Financial security, independence, a clean break. She set down her wine glass and turned to face him. I don't want it. I want to stay. Not because of contracts or security or financial benefits. I want to stay because this is my life now. Our life. Our empire. Elena, let me finish. She took his hands in hers. I love you. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe gradually over these past weeks. Maybe all at once when you went to war for me. But I love you. And I choose to stay. Forever. Not just 5 years. Adrian's eyes were suspiciously bright. I love you too. I think I started loving you the moment you asked me what would happen if you refused my proposal. You were terrified, but you demanded truth anyway. That's when I knew you were someone extraordinary. So we're doing this? Actually being married, not just performing it? We're doing this. Adrian pulled her into his arms, building an empire together, having children eventually, creating a legacy that lasts beyond us. All of it. Good. Elena kissed him softly. Because I'm not going anywhere. That night, lying in bed with Adrian's arms around her and the sound of waves below, Elena thought about how far she'd traveled in just 2 months. From desperate college student to dangerous partnership. From transaction to genuine love. From victim to queen. She'd been sold to save her father's debts, but she'd transformed that sale into sovereignty. Adrian? She murmured into the darkness. Thank you for seeing potential in me when I couldn't see it myself, for teaching me to be powerful, for loving me. Thank you for choosing to stay, for becoming my equal, for making this arrangement into something real. His arms tightened around her. You're the best investment I ever made. Elena smiled against his chest. I'd better be. You paid $4.7 million for me. Best money I ever spent. She could hear the smile in his voice. Though you're worth considerably more than that now. Between your foundation, your business holdings, and your skills at political manipulation, you've built independent assets worth millions. Our assets, Elena corrected. Everything we build together. Together, Adrian agreed. 6 months later, Elena stood on the terrace of their cliffside home, watching the sun set over the Pacific while Adrian took a business call inside. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, the pregnancy test she'd taken that morning confirming what she'd suspected for weeks. They were going to have a child, an heir to the empire they were building together. The Elena Moretti Foundation was thriving, having helped over 200 young women access education and job training in its first 6 months. Victoria Cross had become both a mentor and a genuine friend. Rebecca Chen was teaching her advanced contract law. Sarah Kim had pronounced her combat skills sufficient to defend herself in most situations. And Adrian, her husband, her partner, her equal, was teaching her how to build something that would outlast them both. She heard him end his call and felt his arms slide around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her stomach. You're pregnant, he said quietly. Not a question. How did you know? You've been tired lately, emotional, and this morning you couldn't stand the smell of coffee. His voice was full of wonder. We're having a baby. We're having a baby, Elena confirmed. Are you ready for this? Absolutely not, but we'll figure it out together. He turned her to face him. Like we figure everything out. Together, Elena agreed. They stood on the terrace watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose gold and violet. Two people who'd started as a transaction and transformed into something extraordinary. An empire builder and the queen who ruled beside him. A partnership forged in shadow and sealed with genuine love. The champagne at their engagement party had tasted like surrender. But surrender had been the first move in a strategy that led to conquest. Elena had conquered her fear, her circumstances, and the world Adrian had introduced her to. She'd transformed from prey into predator, from victim into sovereign, from purchased bride into genuine partner. And now, with a child growing inside her and an empire spreading before them, Elena Moretti looked at the future and saw not limitations but infinite possibility. She was 20 years old and commanded resources beyond most people's dreams. She ran a foundation that changed lives. She stood as equal partner to one of the most powerful men in San Francisco. She was loved, protected, valued, and genuinely happy. The girl who'd been traded to save her father's empire was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd built her own. "I love you," Elena said, looking up at Adrian with absolute certainty. "I love you too," Adrian replied. "My queen, my partner, my wife." And together, hand in hand, they watched the sun disappear into the Pacific, leaving behind the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Building their dynasty not through force or fear, but through genuine partnership and the fierce determination to protect what they'd created together. The transaction had become transformation. The arrangement had become truth, and the marriage that began with a price had become priceless.